You guys ready? Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Sorry, this is like either too loud or not loud enough. I'm Kate Atwater Butcher. I'm the chair of the zoning board. This is our March meeting. I have Jen Brady to my left. She is our zoning official, and Sally Broussard is our stenographer, and I'll let the rest of the board introduce themselves.
Robert Closter Jr. Mark McGuire.
We have our Nick Salitro, our solicitor, and then we'll switch to hopefully to Bill Landry or Matt. Is it Bill? Okay. We have a little bit of moving around of the agenda this evening. Before we get to the applications, I just want to we have a couple of continuances I want to go through. The first continuance of the evening is the Town of New Shoreham, Plat 3, Lot 127, Mansion Road, application by the town manager for a special use permit under Section 306E, government facility for installation of public restrooms at Mansion Beach. The Planning Board and Conservation Commission advisory is pending, so we are, they've asked for a continuance to our April meeting, which is April. Okay, so I'll make a motion to schedule it to April 26th.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. The second continuance is Christopher Goria, Plat 19, Lot 37, fire number 919, Champlin Road, an application for a special use permit under Article 3, Section 306E, Article 4, Sections 401 and 403 for a secondary dwelling development. All existing structures will be raised. The planning board advisory again is pending, so they're requesting a continuance to the April meeting. I'll make a motion to schedule it to the April, what is it, 26th? April 26th meeting. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Third continuance is BI Harbor Views Partners 2 LLC, Plat 4, Lot 29, fire number 638, Cord Neck Road. An application by Richard Hayes for a variance from sections 113C and 306C for construction of an addition to a single-family dwelling. They are requesting a continuance. I will move to continue them to the April meeting. All in favor? Hmm. It's just, I think that their attorney's on vacation. So I think, yeah, it's not that, is everybody going to be here for April? Yes. Okay. Okay, just, okay. We have the other things that I want to go through is I'm going to kind of toss up the agenda. I will be, after the applications, I'll be reading a decision, and then we have to have a switch to our agenda for the public hearings. And we will be hearing Curtis, then Flowering Spade, and then Leone. Then we have two up after that. I said after the application, then we'll do the applications first. Okay, so that being said. The first application of the evening is Block Island Housing Board, Lot 18, Lot 2-3, West Side Road, an application for a special use permit under Section 405, affordable housing for construction of 8 duplex structures, creating a total of 16 rental units restricted to year-round residents. Cindy, is that you?
Cindy Pappas, on behalf of the Housing Board.
Okay, so do you have, oh, that's it, okay. There, I'm missing, I think it looks like I'm missing a page of the middle.
There's
No, I think that might have been the, second.
Middle checklist?
It's online.
Okay, well, it's not in here.
Let me see.
This goes with the first one. Yeah, I can always go online, but. So this is a special use permit, which we have a checklist. I'm not gonna know how to work this at all. Okay. The first item for development plan review is a list of names and addresses, which has been submitted. A copy of all variances, modifications under special use permit approvals is attached. There are none to attach. Find it. Sorry, I don't know how to work this kind of computer. All materials required to support the special use permit decision revised to reflect the decision, including all conditions, any conditions or stipulations imposed that's non-applicable. This is not our normal
That.
checklist.
Development plan review, go back. There's another one. Okay, skip to the next one.
All right, I'm gonna skip to the next application. Sorry, Cindy, while we get that squared away. The second application is James and Mary Cronin, Plat 8, Lot 255, fire number 363 High Street. An application for a variance from sections 309C for expansion of an existing single-family dwelling. I will be accepting the application, but without looking at the abutters list, I may have to recuse, but I can accept the application and get you scheduled.
And the plans say 855.
Hi, Doug.
Hey there. Doug Gilpin, architect, Charlottesville, Virginia, and Block Island.
Okay, so it looks like everything looks pretty squared away. Does anybody see anything here that they want to see that they don't see in the application?
So I may have missed it, but I'm not seeing setbacks on the in relation to.
You mean on the site plan? On the site plan?
I believe.
Yes, the site plan does show them. It shows the 40-foot setback, the rear setback, and it shows the existing setback at 19.6 and the proposed or anticipated setback of 18.6. It's on this site plan sheet.
Mhm. Yeah, where'd you find it?
Ah, that is just showing you the footprint of the building from the standpoint of the building footprint existing and building footprint proposed. Yes.
Okay. Probably have it in the email. Existing, well, the existing is. Yeah. No, this doesn't have, are you going out on the footprint?
You asked two questions.
I'm sorry.
Which question first?
Well, actually, the first question, the only question I asked was, are you going out on the footprint?
We are going outside the footprint of the present building to reconstruct the, what shall I say, the older decks, the older historic porches.
Okay.
The thing that I'm looking for is just that the new is showing, a smaller variant than the existing. I wonder if we can fix the.
Uh, th- Well, the present corner is 19.6 feet from the property line. The proposed will be 18.6 from the property line. So actually, we're going a foot closer to the property line.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Can you go to April?
Actually, let's see, I'd like to go to May because I would not be able to come back up here for April.
Okay, I will not be here for the May meeting, but I may end up being recused anyway. I just need to look at the abutters list. I think I know I have one abutter, but I might have
All right,
two or three.
I would recommend the May.
Okay, so May meeting, okay.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to schedule this to the May meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. 24th, yeah. No, she printed that, right?
So this is what,
Yeah.
okay.
And this has the submittal checklist in it? Okay. All right, Cindy. Sorry.
I got my glasses.
It's good. I'm just going to go through the checklist. We're going back to the Block Island Housing Board's application. They have submitted the names and addresses of all property owners. There are no variances or modifications to be submitted. They have submitted a composite site plan. They have submitted proposed and existing structures will be indicated, including footprints of foundations and porches. That has been submitted. 3B, spatial requirements, including street and lot lines, has been submitted. Any land disturbance, wells and well and sewage disposal sites. There's no well or on OWTS is proposed. It's on the town, it's on town water and town
Town
sewer.
water, town sewer.
They've submitted the proposed grades and land disturbance. Benchmarks will be shown on the survey. They've requested a statement from the zoning official. CRMC is not applicable. The utility and disposal plan has been submitted. Plans have been submitted. An aerial photo of the property and on the radius map has been submitted. Additional could be available upon request if any of us want to see that. Economic impact report is really requesting a waiver. It says not submitted, but you're really requesting a waiver. Anybody have an issue with that? Okay. Landscape plan, existing landscaping vegetation shown on survey site plan and sheet. So you're also requesting a waiver on that.
Correct, at this time.
But what is it? You have existing landscaping vegetation?
Well-
So you're not, no further landscaping gonna happen?
Correct. We do not have a landscaping plan at this moment. We will as we get further down the road, but we do not have
Okay.
it now.
Does anybody have an issue with that? Open space management, they're asking for a waiver because it does not include any conserved land. And models are asking for a waiver, and a traffic analysis, they're asking for a waiver, and auto dependency.
And I also, I only have 11 by 17, but I don't know if you want a full size.
We'll need a full size for the actual hearing, just because it's hard for us.
Full-size site map.
Well, do you want it for everything or?
I would like, a lot of. You know, let's just keep it this size. Can we just keep it this size? Do we need, do you guys, do you need the full size? It's just a lot of buildings to have into a full size. It's just becomes cumbersome out here. The site, full size site plan would be great.
Okay.
Okay, and then you had a question about, do you want a question about the parking? No? Okay. Any questions for Cindy? It is a special use permit, so we're going to send you to planning and conservation. So we will schedule it for May. May or June will be we'll schedule it for May, and if you can get through those other committees. I'll make a motion to schedule this for the May 24th meeting. Okay. All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. That's yours. Which brings us to our hearings of the evening. The first hearing is for Brian Curtis, trustee, plat 3, lot 92, fire number 710 Cornick Road. Oh, I'm going to read my decision. Ah. Sit back down. Sorry, I've got all screwed up. Today is. Okay. The decision we have tonight is for John Hunt and, Corman, plat 4, lot 16 and 17, fire number 622, Cornick Road, and fire number 1065, Cornick Road, an application for a variance from sections 306C to exceed lot building coverage and setback relief. The proposal merges two substandard lots into one larger substandard lot, all existing buildings to be raised and a new single-family dwelling and accessory buildings to be constructed. I have some notes on that decision. I move to approve the application of John Hunt and Sari Corman, plots 4, lot 16 and 17, fire number 622 and 1065 Cornick Road, for variance from 306C to exceed building lot coverage and setback relief. Their proposal is to merge two substandard lots of record into one larger substandard lot and to raise the existing structures and build a new single-family dwelling with accessory buildings. This decision is based on the following findings of fact. The two lots are located in the RA zone. Both lots are pre-existing non-conforming lots of record. Lot 17 is 0.75 acres, lot 16 is 6.7 acres. 3 acres or 120,000 square feet is required in this zone. Both lots have pre-existing non-conforming dwellings. 4% total building lot coverage is permitted in the RA zone. Lot 17 has a dwelling with a footprint of 2,174 square feet, resulting in a building lot coverage calculation of 6.6%. Lot 16 has an existing single-family dwelling and garage with a footprint of 29,185 square feet with a building lot coverage of 7.6%. Both dwellings sit within the northern boundary setbacks and both sit entirely in the coastal zone. No new construction is currently permitted within that zone. The applicant has proposed raising the existing dwellings, merging the two lots into one, and building a new single-family dwelling with an accessory residential structure and a garage. The newly created lot will be 61,855 square feet. The proposed footprint results in a building lot coverage of 5.4%. The proposed structures will be built entirely outside of the coastal zone. The proposed location of the garage and the accessory residential structure do not conform to the 50-foot setbacks on the west, north, and east. The applicant's architect and engineer it's got cut off at printing. The architect's applicant and engineer testified that the location of the septic tank and the maneuvering of vehicles in the driveway were the reasons for them having to place the building where they are. The proposed merging of the two lots and reduction in footprints bring the property further into conformance than the existing property. They are reducing the nonconformance of lot coverage from an average of 7.1% to 5.6%. The relief that the applicant is seeking is due to the unique characteristics of the lot and restrictions imposed by the coastal zone and the sizes of the existing lots. By reason of the foregoing, there exists a hardship that is more than a mere inconvenience. The hardship is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land and is not due to any physical or economic disability of the applicant. The hardship does not result from any prior action of the applicant and does not result primarily from the desire of the applicant to realize greater financial gain. This decision is subject to the following stipulation. The bulkhead on the single-family dwelling, if built, must meet all setback requirements. Prior to the foundation being poured, the corners of the foundation must be staked by a Rhode Island licensed engineer or land surveyor in the presence of a zoning official. The proposed structures and the lot line changes must be in strict conformance with the site plan and building plans. I just put in those exhibits for me. And this decision is subject to the approval and recording of the administrative subdivision. Second. Discussion. Yep. Prior to the foundation being poured, the corners of the foundation must be staked by a Rhode Island licensed engineer or land surveyor in the presence of the zoning official. Yep. The reasoning behind this is that we're getting a lot of applications that are so close to either the lot line, the setback, or the length of the building, or the height. I mean, there's so many, everybody's just like within an inch of where they need to be, where they can, yeah, it's literally like we have, one application right now that there isn't even a room for them to, for the trim to swell. Like, it will be too long of a building. So I think it's something that I feel strongly that we need to have more engineering done on these. So that's that. Any other discussion? All in favor? Hey. Yeah.
Just a question on that. Are we gonna have new procedures that we'll write down for that kind of thing, or is that gonna be a case by case?
It's going to be case by case because in some circumstances, you don't need it. It's
But
just-
anything that's close, I guess.
If you as the person that's drafting a decision feel that should be part of your decision,
Okay,
or we may add it if you write a decision and it's not there and we feel, someone on the board feels that it may be beneficial to the decision. Yeah, it's going to be case by case. In my opinion. Okay. I have a motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Great. Okay, great, thank you. So okay, Joe. Ready for it. Oh, good. See. Okay, so, Yep, Curtis. We're on to Curtis, which I am recused of, but, Susan, you want to take over? You want to move down here or you want to?
I'd like to open the public hearing for Brian Curtis, trustee, Plat 3, Lot 92, Fire Number 710, Corn Neck Road. Application for a variance from sections 113C and 306C to rebuild and expand a dimensionally non-conforming single-family dwelling. And you were here, Joe, for the.
Yes,
Joe
Joe
Priestley?
Priestley, attorney from Wesley, representing Brian Curtis.
Mhm.
I have Brian Curtis here. I have Shay Butcher here who will be testifying, and also Doug Gilpin, the architect. Mr. Curtis owns a small lot in the Corn Neck, about 14,000 square feet. It's surrounded by other small lots. His house was the historic house around which other lots developed. And in fact, some of the adjoining houses were formerly outbuildings from this house. He has been through about a year and a half of trying to reconstruct and maintain the building that was already there, without having to rebuild it. And as the building, every step they seem to take, it's found further deterioration until ultimately it just had to be torn down. He will tell you that story, and so will Doug Gilpin, and so will Mr. Butcher. They've tried very hard to reconstruct the original house in very similar historic fashion to maintain the orientation among the buildings, because it's preserving the existing views from all the surrounding buildings. And also designing it in a style so that it will look like it's been there. It's slightly smaller in footprint than the existing house. It's within the same footprint as the existing house was, and it may have slightly larger, slightly more living area. They're reducing it from 3 bedrooms to 2, but keeping the same 3-bedroom septic system. And with that said, I'll call Mr. Curtis as my first witness.
Would our attorney like to swear Mr. Curtis in? Sally, would you? Oh, there he is. There he is. Okay.
Sure. I think we lost Bill Landry. I'll step in. Attorney Nick Solitro for the town. Sir, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth this evening?
I do.
Very good. You may proceed, sir.
Would you please state your name for the record and spell your last name, please?
First of all, thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. My name is Brian Curtis. Last name is Curtis.
And you own lot 92 and plat 3, which is the subject of this hearing.
That is correct.
When did your family acquire the property?
The property's been in my family for 50 years now. My parents bought it in 1973. They sold it to my aunt Holly in 1985. And after my aunt passed away in the summer of 2020, she left the property to me. So this is the home that I grew up spending my summers in as a child.
Could you please describe the area immediately surrounding your property and how they're developed how they develop, how they interrelate to each other?
People who've been on the island a
Yeah.
long time.
That's why.
probably-
Am I too close to the mic?
So people who've been on the island a long time probably know the property as the Beauregard Farm. This is the property. It's directly behind the old Hobie House. The property that I own was the Beauregard farmhouse where the family lived. And there are 2 other older structures on the farm. One of them is the structure that's currently owned by Kate and Shay Butcher. And that was actually the chicken coop for the farm. And the other smaller structure was the carriage house. And that's now a small family home, and it's owned by Megan and Tim Rivera. And then Chris and Megan Hobie's house is directly to the east. And the house that was formerly owned by Chris's parents is on Corneck Road, the large white house with the red roof. And then just to the west is the house that now owned by the Hayden brothers.
And all of the lots in the neighborhood are substandard lots, less than the 3 acres required. are they not?
To my knowledge, yes,
Did you recently commission a survey of the property by Atlas Land Surveying?
I did.
Survey, entitled property, survey site plan, 83 lot 92, 710 Cornett Road. Do you have a survey?
That is correct.
That would be exhibit 1.
Maybe Sally, if I
if it helps to refer to the survey, would you please describe the condition of the property when you acquired it from your aunt?
I would describe it as run down, for lack of a better term. That the house is very old, and you know, as best we know, the house dates to the mid 1800s. We don't have an exact date, and the house had not been really maintained for many years, and so the combination of the lack of maintenance and just time had left the house in reasonably poor condition.
And that led you to try to rebuild the house, keeping it as it was. Is that correct?
I promised my aunt I would try to save the house, and I would try to keep it in the family and do what I could to preserve the house. And so that's what I tried to do. You know, I tried to restore it to how it was originally. And so that was the process that I set about.
And can you describe to the board how that process played out and how it brought you here this evening?
Yeah, well, after she passed away and left the house to me, I worked with a contractor here on the island to kind of peel back the layers of the onion. And we initially thought that we would be able to save the house. I love that house. It was a cool old house, right? And I'm kind of a history nerd, so I loved all the history, and I loved all the wooden pegs and the beams in the attic and all of that stuff. And like I mentioned, this is my childhood home. So I moved heaven and earth to try to save this property. And going so far as to, at one point, taking out everything below the roof line and suspending the roof. And so it was like having a roof floating in midair, because I wanted to save that because it had the old wooden pegs, and some of the beams were from, I was told, were from shipwrecks and things like that. And I remember standing out there with Doug and Ernie George, engineer, under this suspended structure, looking at it, and we could just see how everything was rotted and deteriorated. And honestly, we didn't know how the house had stood that long. And we made the decision that there really was no decision to be made, because this just could not be saved. It certainly would not be structurally sound. And so that was when we knew that we had to try to rebuild the structure. But in that process, I had taken as much material out of the old house as I could, because it had planks this wide in the attic, and this beautiful hardwood flooring, and there were corner posts that were like the spars from a ship. And it's all in my parents' basement up at Sheffield Farm, and my intent is to put that back into the structure that Doug has designed, so that some of the old structure will live on in the new.
I'd like to show you an aerial. And it's a more recent aerial, because I think it shows just your house as a foundation. If you could
Yes.
identify this.
Yes, that is the footprint, the foundation of the house.
Exhibit 2 as an aerial of the foundation.
So are you requesting from the board this evening the variances that are necessary to rebuild a house similar to the original house in precisely the same location, although with a very slightly smaller footprint?
Yes, that is correct.
And during this process, did you send a letter out to your neighbors informing them of the project?
I did. I sent out a very detailed letter to all of my neighbors, and one of the things that I thought was important to include in that letter were the renderings that Doug did of the structure so that my neighbors would see exactly what will be there.
And I've got a copy of a letter addressed to Block Island neighbors, signed by you with those very renderings that you referred to attached to it. Let me show. Is that the letter you sent your neighbors?
Yes, that is correct.
Exhibit 3 is the letter to the abutters.
And did you receive any responses to your letter?
I did. I received several.
And were they generally favorable?
They were. I received a very nice letter from Megan and Tim Rivera. That's the carriage house that I referred to earlier. It's the house directly behind my house. I also received a letter of support from Megan and Chris Hobie, and also Steve Shaw and Alice Russo, who own the house that is directly to the west of Kate and Shay's house. It was the former Dugan property.
I'm sure you sent emails from you to me attaching a letter from Stephen Shaw to you dated December 11, 2022, a letter from Tim Rivera to you dated January 20, 2023, and a letter from Megan Hoey to you dated also dated January 23rd, 2023. Are these the letters you just referred to?
Yes, they are.
Mark these applicants.
Exhibit 4. Three pages of letters of support from the abutters.
There was no opposition.
And you, unless you have something further to add, I have no further questions from Mr. Curtis.
I just want to stress once again that I never intended to be here. It was always my intention to save this house. And I did everything in my power, and I've worked with a lot of people here on the island to do that. And sadly, that was not possible. And from the start of the point where I knew I would have to rebuild this structure, I've had 3 goals. And that is to rebuild something that is extremely respectful of the original structure. And Doug did a beautiful job with that. To build a structure that would be respectful of my neighbors, and because they are substandard lots and we are close, and to build something that would be respectful of the island itself. I love this place.
Thank you.
Sorry. This is all really emotional for me. So I appreciate your time.
I sympathize with where you've been, and I'm really sorry that you can sort of stuff didn't work out. Especially because you have any kind of real issue with rebuilding, because you constructing something that exists and has always existed on that site. If any advice when you make a decision to completely reconstruct and break and
In terms of,
Judith, I think that Doug is prepared to address just that issue. Doug Gilpin. Okay,
yes, I did get advice. I did not just randomly proceed. I got advice from several people, including the contractor I was working with at the time. And obviously I talked with Doug. I was working with Doug. So yes, I did receive advice.
specifically about what might occur when you think of support. Yeah, I'll just.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry. Where it says Bush. I'm trying to see how this fits into the zoning ordinance. And I just keep coming back to, and I'm not saying that I'm here as a final position, somebody will probably argue me out of it, but you're on a 14,375 square foot lot. And in the residential A zone, that qualifies you for additional lot coverage because it's considered a small lot. And there's special provisions for small lot. But 5% lot coverage is what you're given versus the 4 that would be appropriate in the residential A zone. So I'm trying to figure that out.
I understand your question. I just don't feel like I have the knowledge to answer that question.
And I think part of it is, the answer is he's building a house, trying to keep it in line with the historic siting of the house, the historic siting of the structures, and reducing it somewhat from what was there. It's still more, it does require lot coverage relief. He's also keeping it in the same location rather than moving it more to the center of the lot where he might technically require less dimensional relief, but which would then ruin all the views of all his neighbors. That's what he's trying to do.
Yeah, it's the coverage and not so much the setback relief that's required. That's troubling. And we just have, lots of other property owners coming with small lots of this size. And they're designing for 5% because that's what they're given under the ordinance. And so I just wondered if you had gotten any advice about that at the time that you made the decision.
The advice that I was given was that because I was staying on the exact same footprint, that I would be okay. I was told that repeatedly, that as long as I was staying on the exact same footprint, that there would be no question. And so I took that to be true.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
The next witness is Shay Butcher.
Hi there, Shay Butcher, Block Island.
Could we ask that Mr. Butcher be sworn in?
Maybe. Gotta wait for a red light.
Our town solicitor is on mute.
I don't know if he can hear you.
Bill could. Sally, you want to?
I mean, there's 2 solicitors on right now, but they're not responding.
Yeah, if the steno wouldn't mind swearing the witness.
I do. Shay Butcher, Butcher.
Butcher, what's your occupation
Contractor for 25 years, and I'm a carpenter.
and where do you live?
We live on Old Town Road here, and we have the house down the next to Mr. Curtis's.
And how long have you known Mr. Curtis?
30 some odd years.
And how did you become familiar with his property?
Married my wife, and we now own her family home.
And that's the house.
The house right to the
North?
west, yeah, northwest.
Yeah. Were you able to observe what Mr. Curtis has described going on his property over the last couple of years?
I happened to be doing a little renovating on the interior of our house, painting and whatnot, and spent quite a bit of the winter last year there, and saw the house up in the air. As a curious contractor, kind of went over, and it was in rough shape, and I was impressed that he had waited so long and tried so hard to rebuild it as it was and save most of it.
Have you reviewed the plans he's presented at the board this evening?
I have.
What's your opinion of them?
I think it's a beautiful design. I think it fits in perfectly. It keeps it on the foundation where it was, which visually for all the neighbors and abutters is about as far out of, which is almost impossible down there, anybody's direct view of anything. So I think the location would be to keep it, that's to keep it where it is.
Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Butcher.
Does anybody on board have questions? All right, thank you.
My last witness is Douglas Gilpin.
And my name is Douglas Gilpin.
And let me see if our solicitor will swear Mr. Gilpin in.
If the steno wouldn't mind swearing in the witness.
Yes. First name Walter, middle name Douglas, last name Gilpin, Gilpin.
And Doug, how long have you practiced as an architect?
42 years, Joe.
Sorry to ask that.
Yeah.
And how have you also served on the New Shoreham Historic District Commission?
Yes, I was on the HDC from 2006 through 2015.
Were you the chair for a portion of that period?
No, I was
You were
not
not.
chair.
You've heard Mr. Curtis describe his somewhat unfortunate odyssey.
Yes.
When and how did you become involved in it?
I was contacted, well, first of all, friends of ours had rented a house nearby, the one that Shay is presently owns. And so I had seen the house over the years. I was contacted by the initial builder with whom Mr. Curtis was working with in mid-July of 2021. Wanted me to take a look at the house, and I visited it with a restoration contractor from Cape Cod, who happened to be visiting with us. And that was the first time I saw the inside of the house.
Have you, in connection with this, prepared a document which we've called Curtis Timeline and Backstory, beginning on October 8th, 2022? Or
Yes.
dated October 8th, 2022?
Yes,
And does that include pictures and a chronicle of discussions with town officials?
that's correct. Emails and photographs of the house at the various conditions.
Is this, that,
Yes, sir, it is.
the Curtis Timeline and Backstory dated October 8th, 2022?
Exhibit
Applicants 5?
5.
I think you heard this question Mrs. Cyranak asked regarding consultation with others during the process.
Yes, sir.
Can you walk the board through the intensive consultations that you or Mr. Curtis have had during this process?
Absolutely. Let me give a little preface to that. As I mentioned, in mid-July, I saw the house, the interior of the house the first time, where some interior removals of finishes were being performed. Could see some of the interior structure of the house. I then did some additional photographs on July 10th. September 3rd, I returned to the island and took some additional photographs. At that time, as Mr. Curtis pointed out, that the walls and flooring had been removed and the house roof was being suspended.
And if I may interrupt you just for a second,
Yes, sir.
are these the photographs?
Yes, these are the photographs that I took on July 10th. As well. Yes, these are photographs of July 10th as well as on September 3rd, where the house, the roof of the house was being supported.
Exhibit 6, photos of the house during attempted restoration, I would say.
Can you now walk through, once you became familiar with the house, what you did with Mr. Curtis administratively?
Well, I had never met Brian before. We had chatted on the phone several times. He wanted to, of course, rehabilitate, restore the house as much as possible. On September 26th of 2021, we had a meeting at the site. Brian and Matt joined me along with the builder. We also had with us Ernest George, professional engineer, structural engineer from Wakefield, Rhode Island. And we walked around the building. We reviewed everything. And while one said with an unlimited budget, somebody could conceivably reuse maybe 50% of the structural members of the roof, we also acknowledged that the foundation was pretty much shot, and that Brian sadly made the decision to look at a rebuild of the structure. At that time, we also decided it would be best to contact the building inspector at that time. Of course, we did not have a official building official, but a building inspector. So the next day, that would be September 27th of 2021, I emailed the building inspector, gave him the complete background of the project. And I think probably within 2 hours of my email that went out, I got a telephone call from him. And he said he was familiar with the project. He had seen what was going on. He made note that the builder at that time had not gotten a demolition permit. However, he said, and this was the main question that we all asked, if we rebuilt on the footprint, if that would be allowed. And according to the building inspector, yes, we could rebuild on the building footprint. As a matter of fact, that was further reinforced a few days later when I asked if a bulkhead, if a cellar bulkhead were built outside the footprint, if that would be allowed. He said, no, we would have to keep a cellar bulkhead within the footprint of the present building, which we did do. So everything that we are doing for the new structure is within the footprint, probably 9 inches coming in on each side of the prior foundation of the building.
And can you, moving ahead now to January 2022, can you pick up with the process?
Yeah. At that time, let's see, Jen had become the official zoning official. And I knew that as we were developing plans, we were going to be submitting this information, and I advised that we would be, that this project is continuing. I can't remember. I think the building inspector at that time may have moved over to the facilities manager. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of everything.
And what advice did she give you at that
I
time?
did not get any
You got no-
advice at that time.
At that point, you proceeded then based on what you had from the previous building inspector?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I just clarify? So there was an email addressed to Tom Reesum, Jen Brady, Bernie George, dated September 27th, 2021. And Doug does ask for my response. I didn't get that email. So, here it is. So, just-
I don't want to jump. Joe, may I answer?
I think,
that?
you answer his question. Yes, please. You answer his question.
We prepared the plans based on, after doing our due diligence and keeping the building on the footprint, albeit it's even smaller than the prior foundation footprint. The plans were submitted by the, I'll call it the new contractor, for a permit I want to say in early September. We had to provide a new zoning review form, and I think in filling that information out is where it stopped with regards to the zoning, because. Yes. Well, we did our due diligence, we proceeded, that's correct.
So then you tore down the house and you found out what you were told about rebuilding on the footprint isn't true. Is that correct?
Say that again?
So you tore down the house and you thought you could build on the footprint. So you tore down the house and you found out you couldn't build on the footprint?
We asked for clarification of rebuilding the house or building the house because we knew it'd have to be a new structure. As long as we stayed on the footprint, we could build.
Okay,
That was September of 2021, year and a half ago.
okay.
We did not apply for a building permit until a year later.
And then you found out.
That's when we found out the big timeout began.
Okay.
Sorry, could I just ask, so there's a message in this package that we, I don't know what,
Oh, applicants exhibit 5?
yeah, I think so,
Okay.
where you say, and it's highlighted,
This is your microphone. 6 is told, are they, the one you're talking about? Okay. Yep.
there's a highlighted box that you said, Tom Bison has approved the rebuild of the footprint, all legal. So, but I don't see any email from Tom in this package.
You don't see me emailing Tom?
I
He
see
shared
you
the same-
emailing Tom, but I don't see Tom's response where,
He
You-
called me.
okay,
He called me, and as soon as he called me, I then contacted Brian, filled him in, and then I followed up with, let's see, with an email, I think, to Brian and to Ernest George.
yes, I saw that email.
All right, there it is. Tom Reesum has approved the rebuild of the footprint, all legal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to show you a document entitled Site Plan by Richard A. Green, September 2004. You familiar with this?
Yes, sir. This is the site plan that was taken from the 2004 septic plan designed by Richard Green. Of course, with the septic, he has to do a site plan. So this was prepared by Richard Green per standards of 2004.
And there are notes in red on that.
Those are my notes, yes, showing the existing house and then the proposed footprint.
Mark the site plan by Richard A. Green, September 2004.
Number 7.
Well, it's not stamped by Richard Green, but it's,
A site plan by Richard Green from September 2004.
Can you explain? Oh, that's, no, that's Sally's copy. Can you explain how this site plan relates to the Atlas survey already identified as applicants 1?
Yes, since there was not a site plan, and actually that was the only plan that Brian had of the property in from 2004 done by Richard Green. We used that as the basis in our building permit application, for lack of a better description. The question came up as to the validity of the site plan as to the size of the property. There was some,
The original one?
this was the,
yeah, can you just make sure the green light is on your?
The original site plan or the second one?
the 2004 site plan, which
Yeah.
accompanied Richard Green's septic design, is what we used for the building permit application,
Okay,
because that was a bona fide site plan prepared by a Rhode Island engineer at that time. 2004. There was a question as to the validity and the size of the property. Remember, this is about 1/3 of an acre, this piece of property. I checked on the town records and I found 3 additional sizes of the property. It was therefore decided to get an accurate survey, which was then prepared by Atlas Survey.
And is the current application based on the Atlas survey?
Yes, it is.
I'd like to show you,
That's applicants, that was marked as an exhibit.
I'd like to show you a series of documents entitled Curtis Residence, Plat 3, Lot 92, Corn Neck Road, Block Island, Rhode Island, permit set by W. Douglas Gilpin Jr., architect, consisting of sheets A101, A102, A103, A104, A105, and A106.
Actually, I've got a small version of it. I personally prepared these plans with the exception of the structural work being prepared by Ernest George, professional engineer.
Is it the same,
Yes.
do you want to verify?
Joe, what is the date on that?
Exhibit 8, plans from architect Doug Gilpin.
Can you please walk the board through the design of the house and compare it with the house that had been there?
Certainly. Let me try not to get it too complicated, but as Brian pointed out, the early house was probably 1820s, 1840 time period. It had an extension to the west by about 8 foot. I'll call it mid 1800s. And then a kitchen wing, an L is not typically known, probably late 1800s, early 1900s. And then in the 1950s, which actually ended up being an L-shaped structure. And then in the 1950s, a covered porch was created in the southeast corner. Therefore, the footprint that we wanted to do was to follow the exact character and form of the original house. And if you notice, and I will just hold this here, try to speak loudly, L shape with a recessed porch on this side. The left hand or western section of the house, when Brian's aunt was living in the house, it was a 1.5-story house with her bedroom on the 2nd floor. On the east wing was a small garret, which you almost had to stoop in. It was a 3-bedroom house. The new design is a 2-bedroom house. Granted, it's on a concrete foundation, but as I mentioned before, follows the footprint within the footprint of the prior house. Instead of going to a 3-bedroom house, it was decided to go to a 2-bedroom house with 1 bedroom on the 2nd floor, 1 bedroom on the 1st floor, and expanding a sitting area into the kitchen. Again, this is a very small house, 22 feet wide by 30 feet long for the main core, and a 12'9" by roughly 22-foot wing on the east.
Can you describe the roof of the entire house is not a single
No.
height, is it?
No, as a matter of fact, and actually it was pointed out earlier, I think Brian made mention of it, but the prior house had about 1,200 square feet. This house is going to have about 1,100 square feet. So we have a smaller livable area within the house at this stage. And the 2nd floor, as I mentioned, the wing on the east had been a pitched roof. It's now going to be a walkout deck, which actually then allows, what shall I say, cutting down on the mass of the building from other properties.
And what is the effect of the building of the house you propose in the location you propose on the surrounding neighbors?
Well, it doesn't change anything. If anything, the view probably on the east side is a little better for is it Ramirez, the folks who live to the north? As they would to look south. Moving the house in any direction, it would impinge get toward the Hayden Brothers property on the west. The Haydens also on their property have a well, so we would be getting closer to a well. And I think it was all agreed that where the house is historically and also from the viewscape standpoint is in the best location.
And I think you said that it would actually improve the Rivera's view. Is that because the portion of the house that's in front of them, part of it will be lowered to a flat roof, one-story structure?
Correct. It is a walkout deck. That's correct.
I have no further questions for Mr. Gilpin unless the board does.
Happy to answer any questions.
Anybody on the board have questions?
Thank you.
And that's all, folks.
All right.
I have a
Mark?
follow-up, I
Mhm.
guess, for Brian. Sorry. So I'm trying to understand the hardship, and I don't want to characterize it for you, but as I would characterize it, it seems to be that it's sort of an, for lack of a better term, an ancestral home. That's one that you want to preserve. And that perhaps you would have taken a different path had you not been told by town officials that it was going to be okay as you go forward? Is that a correct?
Well, certainly
hindsight
hindsight is 2020, right? And this is not the way I would have chosen for any of this to unfold. So if that's the question,
I think the specific question is, had you not been told by the town official that you could rebuild on the existing foundation, would you have done differently?
of course,
So you relied on the town official's promise that you could rebuild.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
Thank you.
Would
Yeah.
you have gone to great lengths or greater lengths, or would you have just tried to maintain the structure and renovate as opposed
I
to tear
certain-
down?
I certainly would have done what would have been necessary to, keep the structure on the current footprint. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
This is all very regrettable that grew. But at the end of the day, as a board, we're looking at something that needs, an application that needs a variance. And we can't take personal hardships or, any of those kinds of things into consideration. We really have to take into consideration hardships that have to do with the land, the way the land is configured. Something that ties it to the land and not to the unfortunate sequence, of events that took place. If there's a case to be made for hardship, I would just encourage you all to make it. We can't make it for you.
The septic system prevents us from moving to the north. The well on the adjoining property prevents us from moving to the east. The existing foundation is a logical spot to build the existing house, and it is no longer, it is actually smaller than a house which, had he not been advised otherwise, could have,
Almost been.
which had not been advised, could have rigged and worked all within that same footprint and essentially kept the same house building up to the ceiling, to the roof that was hanging there. So without requiring a variance from you.
I have a. Well, I guess I forgot what my question was. 5% lot coverage. What kind of square footage is a reasonable size home? On this lot, 5% lot coverage, which is what kind of, if 1,100,
700.
1,100 feet,
700.
square feet is not a large house.
Five
That's a very modest
5% of
house.
14,000 is 700.
Yeah.
It would be smaller than a 24 by 36 foot gate, which is
Okay.
720.
You can build a 2-bedroom house on a 700 some odd square foot footprint.
I don't
you can.
But
They're two
But he
stories.
said, oh, okay, so it's gotta be the footprint, okay. There's-
A footprint, a 36 by 24-foot footprint
Mhm,
is 720 square feet.
okay.
And
Yeah.
that's a typical Block Island cake,
It's actually, I would say it's quite small.
a small
in
Block
this day and
Island.
age.
But part of the reason they're here is because it was like a story with maybe some finished attic space, but this is a full 2 stories. Even if they built on that footprint, they would go up and probably need a variance because of the additional living space on that second floor. Because of the proximity to the setback, to the property.
But had they not been told to use footprint, that they could have stayed within the same dimensions had they chosen to.
You know,
Right, but I mean, they had professional advice available to them at the time, and I mean, I don't see anywhere in the zoning ordinance that says that you can rebuild on an existing foot. I can't find the zoning ordinance section that says that, so I'm kind of stuck with, it says 5%, and for us to go over 5%, you have to show a hardship.
I'd just like to respond to that in 2 ways. First of all, I swear that if you went to the site, you would see that there's no other place to put a structure that makes any sense in terms of the location of the well, in terms of the location of the septic, and in terms of the location of my neighbors. There's no other place that makes sense. There just isn't. Because the second thing I'd like to say is that for the past 2+ years now, I've done everything in my power to do the right thing and play by the rules. And I was told repeatedly that people with the town had said that this was okay. I'm not a rule breaker. That's not how I roll. And I was told repeatedly that someone with authority and knowledge said that this was okay. Building on the same footprint was going to be totally fine. If I had been told that, if I'd been told something else, I would have done something else. But that's not what I was told.
we understand, but when we
Yeah.
write a decision, we have to make sure it's legally sound. 'cause it can get
Absolutely.
appealed by anyone. So
Absolutely.
can we ask our attorney if we can consider the promise that he was made? Is that a hardship or not? Can we consider that?
I would say no, Steve. I don't think that's something that, that's in this context, that's not one of the standards in the zoning ordinance for a variance. It might be in some legal challenge to a court, but the board doesn't have the power to decide, whether a zoning officer or anybody else made a representation that they didn't have authority to make. There's a number of cases that say that zoning officials can't change the zoning ordinance by their representations. There are a few cases where that's been found to be unfair, but those are not cases that zoning boards can decide. They don't have jurisdiction. That would be something for a court of law.
Could I ask, does our zoning ordinance define undue hardship?
Yes, it's something that has to do with the unique circumstances of the lot. Not anything that anybody said.
What's that?
The variance, it has to be a hardship that's more than a mere inconvenience, that's due to some unique circumstance involving the lot itself. That's not the result of action by the applicant, not done primarily for financial gain, and not a hardship that's based on some type of physical disability. So the term is well defined to relate to a piece of land that has a hardship, not an individual that has a hardship.
the existing, the former house was 8.5% lot coverage. So it was non-conforming. Is there any case to be made for, since that was a pre-existing condition, that 8.5 would be allowed this time around? Or do we?
Yeah, I think you can take that into consideration. I mean, when I was reviewing this application, I was struck by the fact that there really is very little relief here, that all of the, and it doesn't appear to have been an intention to abandon the pre-existing non-conforming use. The applicant's been very clear here for an hour that there was it was not his intent to abandon that use. So, I don't think the board should penalize the applicant. I think the board can look at the size of this 14,000 square feet. He needs 120,000. It's a very minor expansion, all things considered, to the pre-existing non-conforming use that has not been abandoned, in my opinion, based on what we've heard said. So the board can consider this based on the constraints that this lot has in meeting current zoning requirements and the fairly benign nature of the relief from existing non-conforming conditions that's being requested.
Bill, could you comment on the abandonment of use versus abandonment of structure? Because the structure was clearly abandoned. If we were being asked to consider a variance so that an existing building could be the continued use of that building, but this building doesn't exist.
I'd like to argue that we've not abandoned the building. This has been a continual process trying to use the building. There was never any intent to abandon the building, and it never intended to abandon those rights.
Yeah, I think the same law would apply to either kind of nonconformity. And the law is that there is a presumption of abandonment that can be overcome by an applicant showing that he did not have the intent to abandon. And, there may be other witnesses that testify tonight, and it's really not up to the court, up to the board to decide, the nature of the non-conforming use and the issue of abandonment. That's something for a court, but the board can consider that, there is a non-conforming use here, that there's no evidence that it's been abandoned, and consider that in terms of the hardship for a new structure that would go on the same footprint.
I think Mr. Gilpin has, no. Okay.
There's no argument that the use, there was never any intent to abandon the use being a single family residential structure.
And I would say this has been all part of the process of trying to rebuild, maintaining the existing house. And only when it became, and had the roof still been sitting there, you'd probably say so too. I don't think that is,
Yeah.
I don't think that is dispositive. I think you can consider the process as a whole and consider this as trying to rebuild the previously existing house on the location. Since it's all followed directly.
Yeah, I'm sure there's been many cases where we've approved buildings that we're not making it more non-conforming than, it already was, basing it on an existing house. It's just tough because right now it's a vacant lot. And there's other people out there struggling to come in within the 5% footprint on lots that are that size or even slightly larger.
But Judith, I don't know that those necessarily had a pre-existing foundation.
The foundation is
And
still
a
there.
Pre-existing lot coverage.
And we're told they could take down their house. Can you imagine if
I'm
you're
not
him?
considering
I
that.
know, but
I'm
if
not.
he's just gonna
Alright,
sue us for
well.
promissory estoppel.
And I think they did follow they followed what the building department said for like the process of removing that structure, and they tried to save it, but then when they applied for a building permit, that's where I review it for zoning compliance, and that's why they're here.
Right, no, I
So
hear you.
I think they took all the steps to.
Can we consider Bill equitable estoppel in our decision at all?
Yeah, Steve, I don't think the board has the ability to make those determinations. That's something for a court to decide, whether whether the non-conforming use has been abandoned or not. And the issue of equitable estoppel, that usually connotes some kind of official action on the town's part. That's pretty egregious. Again, the majority of the cases that have dealt with this, where somebody said something and somebody relied on it, have involved, have been decided based on the rule that the zoning official can't change the zoning ordinance. But there are a few cases where there was a question of interpretation that was resolved a certain way, and it wasn't clear that the applicant would have, the answer was clear in the body of the zoning ordinance, so that you're not changing the zoning ordinance, you're just interpreting it in a different way. So the abandonment and estoppel issue could go either way. But I don't think that I think the board can consider the fact that there is still a foundation there that has not been eliminated, that it's in place. It is a grandfathered condition. It might be different if the whole house was torn down. We're just talking about dimensional issues here and what can go within the airspace above that foundation. So I do think the foundation's a pretty important feature.
Thank you. Are there any comments from people in the room? Shay? Mhm. Anyone else? If there
Thank
are no other comments, I'll close the public hearing and we will take this under advisement. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Second, right. Second to close the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, our next hearing is Flowering Spade LLC, Plat 2, Lot 32-2, Corn Neck Road. Application for a special use permit under Section 406 to construct a single-family dwelling, accessory structure to be used as game room and storage, and an accessory structure to be used for storage and fitness studio. The single-family dwelling exceeds the limits set forth in Section 306E. Planning Board conditional approval for an administrative subdivision of lots 32-1 and 32-2.
Good evening. My name is Scott Spear, S-P-E-A-R. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Blish and Kavanaugh, and representing the applicant this evening. We will be putting together a presentation, a series of witnesses, and some documents to submit in support of the application for a special use permit. I think you're probably all aware that we have been to the Conservation Commission. The same witnesses that are here with me this evening appeared before the Conservation Commission, where we got a unanimous approval over the design of the project. We also went to the Planning Board, and if you haven't seen their decision, it was a favorable unanimous decision as well, with an advisory opinion, development plan review. It was determined that we had satisfied all of the relevant standards of Section 501. Everything's been met from a design development plan review standpoint. We also had a favorable advisory opinion on the application for a special use permit. and that the project is consistent with section 406 of the zoning ordinance, as well as the New Shoreham Comprehensive Plan. We haven't had any comments from the public. There hasn't been any opposition that has come up during the prior two meetings that we've had. And the applicant did meet with members of the Nature Conservancy, the Rhode Island Conservancy, the Block Island Conservancy, and the Block Island Land Trust, which owns a substantial amount of property around this property, to make sure that there weren't any issues that they thought would be something that we should take into consideration. They had no objections to the project as well. We think that's a significant issue. I do have an additional witness tonight that hasn't testified at the other boards, and that's a real estate expert who will be offering some opinions to certify some of the standards dealing with consistency of the surrounding uses and in support of the design as well. Scott Rabideau, who I'm sure you're familiar with, has testified in the town a lot, was supposed to be here this evening. He did testify before the Conservation Commission. He also testified before the Planning Board. His wife just had massive surgery, and he was required this evening to go back to the hospital for a follow-up. So Scott couldn't make it, but I do have a report that I'll submit from him on what he would have said if he could be here this evening. It's the same thing that he testified to before the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission. Hopefully, you'll find his written report satisfactory. If it isn't, I would request that you leave the public hearing open at the end of our presentation. And when you continue it next month for a deliberation and a decision, I could have Scott make a special trip back to spend a couple of minutes answering any questions that you may have. So with that said, and with your permission, I'd like to have our first witness come up, who is the architect on the project. Greg, if you could take the center podium and bring your documents up.
And could you just make sure that the green light's on the microphones, and also Nick Salitro is representing the zoning board. Still is refused, just so you know.
Sorry.
Yes, it's, yeah, Nick Salitro, Attorney Salitro.
Mr. Salito, would you swear in our architect, Greg, last name,
Herman, E-H-R-M-A-N.
Greg Herman?
Sure. Greg, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth this evening?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Greg, could you tell the board what your occupation is?
I'm a licensed architect in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Maine. I'm a partner at Hutka Architects and the principal architect on Flowering Spade.
And how long have you been practicing your profession?
23 years.
Okay. And you're the principal architect on this project?
Yes.
And could you share with the board what your role was in the design process, how the decisions were made to come up with the design that's part of the application right now, and explain to them the features, the factors that were taken into consideration to build a structure that would be proper for that site, suitable for the surrounding area, perfect for the terrain, and satisfy all of the zoning standards in the town?
Be happy to. So thank you for having us tonight. I was invited to join the project team. My office was invited to join the project team in the spring of 2021. We visited the island several times to meet with the client, but also to gain an understanding of the character of this place. We do a lot of work on coastal New England, so but every community is a little different. So we spent time here prior to beginning the design process. We also spent time doing a comprehensive review of the zoning bylaws to understand what the purpose of your bylaws are, what the rules are. There's a lot. So, we took some time to really digest that. The project, as currently designed, includes a 2-bedroom main house, which is 1 story tall, and a detached 2-bedroom bunkhouse. There's also a garage, a 1-car garage, detached garage, and a structure we're calling a barn. It's a building that's adjacent to a swimming pool, so it serves the swimming pool area with a powder room and some game table and a recreation space. The program, 2-bedroom main house with a accessory 2-bedroom bunkhouse, separate detached building, is the program. That's the number of the bedrooms that our client with their 3 adult children, that program works well for them. That's the amount of space they need. And the building that we designed, the project that we designed, was done so with flexibility in mind. We know their family's going to change, so having the building set up in a primary residence of two bedrooms and an outbuilding for kids that might have, their children who might have young children in the years to come worked really well for them. The key elements that we considered in the design process. Actually, so can I hand out? Design. There's one for everybody. If it's easier to handle the 11 by 17 if they'd like.
Thank you.
So the handout here is,
Excuse me, is this to be an exhibit?
yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. So these are project renderings, the key elements that we consider in the design of the building. In all the buildings is a naturally weathered exterior finish palette. All the exterior materials are cedar and stone. There's no paint applied to the building. So the idea with the naturally weathered materials is that seasonally, as trees leaf out, and then in the off season when leaves go away, buildings become more visible. We want the building to weather with the landscape. So on a bright sunny day, the building it'll weather silver, it'll go gray. In the off season, it'll go, gets a little bit darker when the air is wet. So it kind of moves with the seasons. It's also a very durable and resilient way to build. Low maintenance materials, rot resistant, reduces maintenance needs. Not good if you're a painter, but it's a really smart way to build if you really want to keep maintenance down and have a building that will endure, especially in an environment like this. The building is conceived of a collection of smaller volumes. That's done in a way that it sort of feels like the building's evolved over time, sort of done in sort of a New England vernacular. You see this a lot in farmhouses where, you built what you need as you need it, and you get this additive massing attitude to the project. As I mentioned, the primary residence is 1 story. The idea of that is that it also strengthens this idea that it was, the different parts were built over time, and it significantly reduces the building's visibility from surrounding properties. Environmentally, 100% of the stormwater will be managed on site. This includes all stormwater that may come out of the sky hitting the building or the designed landscape. We'll have witnesses later that can speak to that. We have a ground source heat pump system that will provide the heating and cooling in the building. That's a significant element of the design because it's a heating and cooling system that you cannot see. The wells are underground, the equipment's inside. There's no visible equipment outside, and there's no noise because again, it's all the equipment is inside the building, no outside mechanical equipment. It's also a super, we have a desire to drive our electric usage down on the project. The ground source heat pump system is the most efficient way to heat and cool a house in New England. Elimination of outdoor equipment also reduces maintenance over time. So, less traffic, less maintenance needs. Because it's an electric system, it's going to get paired with a battery that will be charged by solar panels. So this will eliminate the need for any fossil fueled outdoor generator as well. So emergency power, again, it's not a whole house generator. It's just for emergency, keeps the lights on, keeps a little bit of heat in the house in case the property loses weather and loses power in the winter. So you don't have to worry about pipes freezing and things like that. As you can see in the drawings and the renderings, the pitched roof volumes are connected by a network of flat roofs. This was done with the intent of reducing the scale of the building when viewed from a distance. I'd like to hand out a second document. Okay. This second document is a document we prepared for in our meetings with the Land Conservancy. And it shows a sequence of views. The front page will show you a map of the Hodge Preserve and a series of views and renderings of what the proposed building will look like from those vantage points.
And if we have it in the file, let's mark what's in the file so that we're not. You want to just verify that it's the.
Yeah, we had one while you were out, Jen.
Yeah, I have that one, right.
So that's been marked. It's considered a, and then D is the, use in the Hodge family preserve, wildlife preserve, January last, that's correct.
Okay.
So you
I'm
have
just
that.
gonna mark this
So we'll give these just for informational, take a look at it, specifies. This is, this is,
Sally, it's applicant's exhibit 2. It's applicant's exhibit 2. This is 1, this is 2.
So in the series of renderings that were just handed out, actually in both sets of renderings, you can see the combination of pitched roofs and flat roof connectors gives the sort of, again, enhances the narrative that these are individual pieces that maybe were sort of added over time. Again, reducing the scale of the building as seen from a distance. The installation of a green roof on those flat roof areas is also part of the proposal. Like green roof adds insulatory values to the house, makes the house perform more comfortably.
Greg, can I stop you for a second? Sure. We just put these documents in front of the board members. Could you elaborate a little bit more and walk them through these pages while they're fiddling with them so that they understand exactly what they are? They're very beneficial. There's a lot of work done to prepare these things, so let's make sure they get the full benefit of your explanation of what they're all about.
Sure. I believe on the first page of the Hodge of the second packet that was just handed out, there's a key plan, and it shows we started at the parking lot and we walked the upper loop, and there's dots indicating each view. So as you get into the next page, there's a rendering at each of those dots, looking back at the building with the proposed building and the proposed landscape rendered with accuracy. And so the first 3 views take you down to the corner of the Hodge Preserve that's nearest to one of our buildings. And then it continues down into the lower meadows and wraps back up as you look back towards the building. So it's a loop that we walked with the group that we met with last fall with the Nature Conservancy and others. We wanted, the question was, well, what's it going to look like when it's done? And those renderings represent that.
So this is to show what people using the conservation land for recreational purposes will be likely to see or not see as they traverse through the trails.
That's right. And important to point out, when we did the renderings, we stood ridge poles up to show the actual height of the 1-story building. So when we overlaid our renderings, they were right on those ridge poles. A lot of care was taken to make sure to get that part right.
And the board will hear from the landscape designer that there's a lot of buffering that's going into the site as well, that's represented in those diagrams.
Does this also say that part of the path is on the property?
Yes, one of the paths goes on the interior stone wall. There's a right to pass through the property. That's an interesting topic for another day on whether whether it would make sense to move it on the other side of the stone wall. But for our purposes,
It's just curious.
Okay.
Yep.
Greg.
So again, I was talking about the flat roofs. So there's aesthetic value to them, supports the narrative of a smaller scale building. And there's a performance component to it, which will drive down energy costs. Will also slow down stormwater. Water rolling off the pitched roofs ends up in the green roof, makes its way down into the structured drainage system more slowly. The green roof slows it down, holds water, so reduces stormwater overages. It also makes the roof more resilient from birds dropping seashells and service people walking on the roof with a screw in their shoe or something. So again, we're focused on durability, efficiency, and the aesthetic piece of it. Electricity, all of the power coming to the site will be, to the property will be installed underground. We're proposing to install a roof-mounted solar electric array on the south face of the two-bedroom bunkhouse. It's got a perfect orientation. Solar electric system reduces the amount of energy that needs to get pulled off the grid. Also will charge a battery that will be kept, a battery generator, which will be stored inside the building to to eliminate the need or the desire to have a propane fired generator outside. So much quieter. And again, it makes its own fuel. So no fossil fuels. In closing, for now, I did want to do a quick review of the guidelines outlined in section 406 of the zoning ordinance, just to address how the project took those into consideration in its development. The renderings that we've handed out, well, in item 1, the proposed residential structure is cited to minimize impact on view sheds, including where possible, located below the crest of a hill or a ridge line and away from centers of open fields.
Greg, let's stop there for a second and just talk about this idea of a ridge line. There is a high spot on this lot that would be optimal to generate the best views from any house that's built. There was a deliberate choice made not to put the house on that high spot, but to put it on a lower spot on the property. What was the thinking behind that decision?
Well, I think first off, we knew that the visibility of the building was going to be central to a lot of people's concerns, and so we didn't want to be on the high spot. The nature of the site is we did test it. We stood up there and built a little platform to simulate where the floor of the house would have been. Given that it's a one-story house, being down slope a little bit didn't make any difference to the view, and the homeowner really wanted to be sensitive. They read the zoning ordinance. They knew this was a thing that was to be focused on, so we tried to put it in a spot that worked best for the ordinance. So that's what I was going to address. You can see the result of that in the renderings handed out. Well, we'll leave it there for that one. The proposed residential structure is designed and cited to be compatible with its cultural settings, in particular with relationship to notable historic, nearby notable historic structures. Knowing that this was important as well, we did a survey of nearby structures and nearby historic structures on this diagram. It's 2 pages.
This would be exhibit 3. A survey of existing and historic houses close to the property.
So as architects, every project we start, we look at the existing context. That includes the nature around the site, includes the built environment. When we're blessed with beautiful views, we get to take those into consideration as well. In this case, there are notable historic structures along Corn Neck Road. We've taken an inventory of non-historic structures as well. In no case do we feel the buildings are particularly close to this building site. There's an interesting statistic in Mr. Rabideau's paperwork, and I'm not going to get the numbers exactly right, but there's about 350 acres of land in the surrounding area of this property. And I think 12.9% of it is considered developed. So the point there is there's a lot of space. Everything's really spread out. This particular lot is quite large. We felt like it felt within it, our building, our design fit within the context of this neighborhood for those reasons. The third item, the area of site disturbance and alteration of natural grade is minimum for the construction of the building. This is important to our whole team. Julie, I think, will speak to this more specifically, but there's a very specific limit of work built around the project, and our goal is to keep that tight, because the more we disturb, the more you have to come back and fix afterwards. Number 4 speaks to all existing stone walls on the site, that they're preserved or reconstructed as part of the site plan. Again, this was very important to us. There's a beautiful stone wall that rolls right between, right along the edge of our building lot. That wall is central to the arrangement of the entire project, and it's a sort of a regulating line in the design, so the house backs up to it, almost sort of defensively, almost like a farmer would. We're not way out in the middle of the field. We're sort of registered back against this ancient stone wall that's there. That wall is going to be protected and reconstructed as part of the project. So the same stones, will be used to make sure that wall is authentically put back together. Number 5, again, this is probably more of a Julie question, and she'll be here in a second for you. But it speaks to screening of the building. Again, we worked, the architect together with the landscape architect worked on the renderings to show plant material at scale, and obviously buildings at scale. So important to the homeowner and important to abutters. Number 6 speaks to attached garages. We prefer detached garages. And in this case, we have a detached garage, so it's I would suggest. That concludes my part.
Okay, do you have your resume, Greg?
I do.
Okay, let's put that into the record as well.
Exhibit 4 is resume of Gregory Ehrman, architect.
Greg, in closing, I just have a series of questions to ask you that all will be premised on your professional experience, your education, you're familiar with the site, the time that you spent working on the project, your examination of the zoning ordinance and consistency with the comprehensive plan. Is it your opinion that the house and structures are appropriate for the specific site and compatible with the adjacent buildings in form, placement, and design?
Yes.
And in your opinion, are the design and layout of the house and the other structures related harmoniously to the terrain and to the existing buildings in the vicinity?
It's supported by the handout. We do believe that, yes.
And in your opinion, as a professional, is the scale, height, bulk, and proportion of the proposed buildings, their design, including the roof style, facade openings, architectural style, and detailing and building materials, visually and dimensionally compatible with the surrounding area?
Yes.
And because the project site does have a ridge, you have made special attempts to preserve the natural environment of the skyline of the ridge. Is that correct?
It is, and it's probably worth noting as well. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the area, but the ridge we're talking about is quite a bit downhill from Corneck Road itself is also a ridge.
And did you mention, speaking of skylines and thinking about the sky, that the house will be dark sky rated?
compliant. All
They're
the,
compliant.
all the exterior light fixtures will be compliant with your bylaw and the state. of Rhode
And in your opinion, is the proposed use and structures such that it will not cause a nuisance or serious hazard to pedestrians or vehicles and their users?
Yes,
And is your opinion that the project will have adequate and appropriate infrastructure facilities, including sewage disposal and drainage, to assure the proper operation of the home and the related structures?
it is designed that way and it will be built that way.
And is it your opinion that the development design is cited in a way that complements and doesn't detract from the island's natural, historic, cultural, and scenic character, the preservation of which is the benefit of all residents and visitors?
We believe it is.
And is the construction of the residential structure such that it doesn't require any variances of dimensional standards, including building coverage, lot coverage, or building height?
That's correct.
And is it your testimony that all of the performance standards in section 514 involving residential structures have been satisfied?
Yes.
And the building footprint of the house is greater than the 2,000 square foot threshold, which requires a special use permit. Is it your opinion that the larger house size is mitigated by the height of the entire building not exceeding 25 feet?
Yes,
And is it also mitigated by the fact that the footprint is broken up by the use of separate buildings?
it is.
And is it also true that it's mitigated by the fact that it's a one-story home rather than a two-story?
Yes,
And is it mitigated by the fact that the house is not built on the highest point on the lot?
it is. Yep.
And it's mitigated by the preservation of stone walls to preserve the natural features?
Yep.
And also you've done a tremendous job of explaining to them that the building size is mitigated by the fact that you've gone through great lengths to preserve and screen the adjacent trail system from views of the house.
Yes,
And you're also using natural materials to help mitigate the size of the house, to make it blend in beautifully with the natural environment, even as the environment changes through the seasons.
I would say mitigate the visibility, right? Yes.
Okay.
Mitigate the visibility of the house seasonally.
All right. I have no further questions of Greg, unless any of the board members do. I'll call my next witness.
I have a couple.
Please.
What is the height of the chimney on the main house?
It's 2 feet by state building code above the ridge.
So the ridge is
sorry.
2311, so that's 2511?
It's 2 feet above anything 10 feet away, 3 feet above a ridge. It's 3 feet above.
3 feet above? Also, are you familiar with the special use permit application, the plan review sheet that was submitted by Scott Spear on December 6th?
Yeah, we'd have to get that out to put it in front of him. Do you want me to get it out of a folder to give it to him? If you've got questions, you want him to look at something on the form?
There are calculations on that sheet. Did you prepare those or was that done by someone else?
I don't have the sheet, so we prepared a lot of calculations. I think
So I'm particularly looking at the longest building plane
okay,
that states 60 feet, 10 inches.
yep.
Did you prepare that?
Yes, we prepared the drawings and provided that dimension,
And
yes.
provided that dimension. Looking at the architectural plan here for the main building, for the principal structure. On that application, you said the longest building plane was 60 feet, 10 inches.
Mind if I come up and take a look at the document that you're looking at, so I can find it and make sure you're on the same page?
Yeah, it should.
That's what Robbie's referring to.
Plan review, yeah, 60, 10, yes.
Yeah, single family dwelling. Yes. Okay, I got it. Okay,
You're good? Question for him?
Yeah, I think we're on the same document.
Okay, I'm just making sure you're all set.
Yep.
How did you come up with that number of 60?
60 feet, 10 inches. So the definition of, that relates to, building plane, 75 feet maximum.
Correct.
So that portion of a building facade aligned in the same general plane, a building angle of 45 degrees or greater with an offset of 16 feet, right? There's rules. So the 60 feet, 10 inches is on the floor plans on the east side of the building is the addition of 8 foot, 4 1/8. It's the 3-dimension strains on the principal structure going from the den, the inside corner of the den to the inside corner of the guest bed.
Now, why would that not be to the outside of the guest bed? Because from the left side of the guest bed, the inside of the den would be 77 feet, 4 inches and 7/8.
On our read, it talks about the variation of building height and style. So we span 3 different roof forms in that interstitial space. So it was our read on that because the language is, it talks about that portion of a building facade aligned in the same general plane. So the variation of the building height and style as referenced in the bylaw talks about this regulation. So that was our read on it, was that because of the variation in the roof lines, that length was the common. There's an eve line in the renderings right across that front. We were looking at that length. And beyond that length, the building turns this way, and this building turns and is able to run it the other way. So we sort of considered that a different, it's not the same general plane. It's 3 different roof forms, and we calculated I do think we're off by my dimensions here are like, Scott,
You
what
had
was the number?
60
60
feet, 10 inches.
60
60 feet.
60, 10.
Yeah. But yeah, it's those 3-dimension strings from inside corner of den to inside corner of guest bedroom, represented by that stretch there. You guys have this is the first rendering in your sheet. So that was our read on it. Do you see it differently?
Yeah, I was just looking at it as the left side.
Yeah.
Only 8 feet, not 16 feet.
Yeah, our read on that was the 16 feet was one of the things, but because it talked about in the same general plane, that the 3 different roof forms from one to the other. I'm sorry.
Mr. Landry, could you please mute? You're coming through over here. Thank you. Sorry. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
It was our interpretation. Well, every bylaw is a little different. The diagrams, we digested them. There's a lot of specificity to them. And we applied the language and sort of how that's why I have the definition of each of those.
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to pull up now as
Yeah.
you're speaking. I'm not seeing where you're referencing the eaves in any of our definitions.
Well, the definition I have is, for building plane 75 feet, that portion of a building facade aligned in the same general plane. And so I know it goes on to say you can have a setback of 16 feet, or you can go 45 degrees for a certain distance. Our read on that was that going from a roof line that runs left to right to a roof line that runs 90 degrees to that was a break in the same general plane. And so that eve line that connects the two is what we calculated. But
Could you show us on an elevation drawing, what you were saying is interrupting that wall plane? The way that it's been done, builders here.
He's not.
He is.
Right.
so that's the den right here.
Okay.
It's a gable that runs left to right. So we calculated from the inside corner of that to where the roof turns 90 degrees, thinking that this was the part that was all in the same general plane.
Well, whether it's right or not, we understand how we got it.
Yes.
It was an
Which is the point.
architectural decision based upon an interpretation and the impact of the interpretation architecturally to break up the house, reduce massing. And these terms that you've identified, changes in the structure style, break the building up so that you're only left with this one wall plane here that's underneath, it's below the 75-foot cap.
I understand your interpretation, yes. And how you came up with your number that's not right on that application.
What do you
Nick,
think-
are you there?
Yes.
I was wondering, if you could clarify their interpretation of our zoning, definition of building plane. They're saying that portion of the building facade aligned in the same general plane. They're saying a break in the eaves disregards.
Yeah, I mean,
Did I clarify?
yeah, if you could.
That was, the definition of building plane reads that portion of a building facade aligned in the same general plane. So we calculated the part of the building that is between a gable that runs east-west and another gable that runs north-south. The space between them is the 60 feet. I'm gonna give you because I do think there's a fraction of an inch difference, because I have an eighth here and you were on a whole inch or half inch, so I think there's a fraction of an inch difference somewhere.
I would ask if our staff has an opinion on the issue. I know they reviewed the application. I'm not sure if that particular issue came up, but they certainly would have seen this in the past. If anybody in the room has input on that, maybe Jen.
This issue hasn't come up. The applicant submitted an application, it was in the summer of 2021, and it exceeded all of the prohibited thresholds, and they redesigned it. And I know we discussed the overall size of it because it was exceeding the 5,000 square feet, but we never discussed the wall plane.
Sure.
Looking to see if there's anything in this planning advisory.
The previous design was designed before the bylaw changed. So when the bylaw changed down to 3,500, we brought it down under that. Yes, that was the redesign.
And I could certainly weigh in on it, but I don't have, the ordinance in front of me right now. I couldn't do it tonight.
What, on the opposing side, what should you trying to say, should be the entire building, should be the general plan? Like, if he's not right, then what's the right answer?
Well, the question is the 45, the building angle of 45 degrees or greater with a minimum distance of 16 feet from the building facade. So that's, from that corner, there's only 8 feet on the right side of that bed, not the 16 to break up that point.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If
So
I may.
if there was 16 feet, that would fall within that definition of building plane. However, it's only 8 feet, which then brings it to the left side of that master bedroom, which brings that total building plane to 77 feet, 4 7/8 of an inch, which would go against the 514 C2.
May I?
Yeah.
So there's no mention in the ordinance of anything other than.
Then
that
other
8
than
foot,
that,
16.
that 16-foot 45.
Well, there's a-
Style, change the roof
Right,
line.
it was their interpretation that the style of the roof and the eaves would break that plane.
And there is an appendix, I can go grab it, but it'll ultimately be your decision whether or not that's your interpretation of it. Of that section.
An appendix to.
Appendix I.
I'll go grab it.
I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, does it read definition of building plane? So there's 2 sentences. That portion of a building facade aligned in the same general plane, period. It goes on to say, my read on this is, if you need this exception, doesn't say that, but that's my read on it. This is the second sentence, a building angle of 45 degrees and so on resets that dimension.
That's clear.
Shall be considered an interruption in the building plane, but our interpretation of that was that we're not in the same general plane. If we were in the same general plane, then we would need the 45-degree angle to reset that. But again, I'm just trying to explain why there's a 2-foot difference, I think, from what's being asked here from what we have in the plan. I did confirm the dimension. It's exactly as you.
Why are you
said.
saying we're not in the same general plane? It looked to me when we just took a quick look at the elevation that it was all, the whole thing was all in the same general plane.
Plus the same. See this? See how this gable is right here?
Yeah.
And this is here, and that's the gable's over here. So he's saying because from here to here is all the same. This gable end with this eave breaks up that building plane from here to here.
Portion's not angled out.
He's saying because this right here.
Wait, excuse, we can only talk one at a time here.
Yep. This building plane from the right side of the guest bedroom to the left side of the den, he's stating is one building plane. And I'm saying, based on the definition, the left side of the den to the left side of the guest bedroom is the building plane. In his interpretation of building plane definition, the bedroom change of the gable breaks up that building plane. See how this is flat?
Makes it more as if it were a separate building. It
Correct.
has this connector.
Correct.
But you're saying the connector is not.
Because from here, from the southeastern corner of the guest bedroom to the corner of the building plane is only 8 feet and something, and not 16 feet by the definition.
All right, well, it's something we will consider as we go through.
Okay, any other questions for Greg?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, Mike Russell, our civil engineer.
Could we have Mr. Russell sworn in, please?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Russell. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth this evening?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Michael Russell, Russell.
Mr. Russell, what is your occupation?
I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of Rhode Island. I am a principal with LDEC Engineering Consulting. Our offices are in Portsmouth.
And how long have you been in practice as a civil engineer?
25 years.
And I have a copy of your resume. Is this,
Yes, it is. That's perfect.
Right, I believe that's exhibit 5. Resume of Michael Russell.
We do have one. What? Yeah, yeah. Interrupt, yeah.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
This one is- one thing that I was looking at was the definition of wall plane from the left side of the den to the right side of the guest bedroom would be the wall plane by our definitions. And the building plane has different eaves, ultimately, different protrusions based on schedule or appendix I. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. Mike, could you tell the board what your role in this project was?
Certainly. So our firm was tasked with surveying the property and providing comprehensive civil engineering services, which included preparing the composite site plan, which is subject to this application, an on-site wastewater treatment design and application, which was submitted to Rhode Island DEM and was subsequently approved. And part of that application was a wetland determination. It was a joint application because there are freshwater wetlands present on the property. So the site plan, the on-site wastewater treatment system design were all subject to review by DEM for a joint application.
And could you explain to the board briefly, walk them through the site plan and discuss setbacks from any wetlands and whether there's any issues there, as well as the location of the septic system well?
Certainly. So in general terms, the site plan was prepared in accordance with the town's planning and zoning requirements, DEM's requirements governing on-site wastewater treatment systems, which included a private drinking water supply well, and also the applicant and architect's directive for a comprehensive site design.
And did you get any correspondence from the town engineer with respect to issues within the jurisdiction of the town concerning septic systems?
Yes, we got I believe, Block Island refers to it as a 506 certification. And we did receive that from the wastewater director.
Okay, so the project will not intrude on any wetlands. We're outside of all of the buffers.
Right, this project, this application with respect to wetlands was submitted in June of 2022, which preceded the regulatory changes for freshwater wetlands that went into effect in July of 2022. So this was prepared in accordance with the previous regulations governing wetlands for DEM.
I know the planning board went through great detail on the performance standards with testimony from you, but as you stand here today, is it your opinion that adequate and appropriate infrastructure facilities, including but not limited to sewage disposal and drainage, have been provided to assure the proper operation of the proposed home and related structures?
Yes,
And it is your opinion that the development proposal will not have any negative impact on important natural resources?
correct.
And it is your opinion that the proposed use and structures will not cause a degradation of the quality of surface or groundwater?
Yes,
I have no other questions for Mr. Russell.
Thank you. Does anybody on the board have a question?
Just one, I don't see the buffer zone lines, or am I just missing the buffer zone lines on the site?
What plan are you referring to, sir? Is
Uh,
that the composite site plan?
That one?
It coincided, I apologize, this is a very busy plan, but this dashed line around the perimeter, this is our limit of work.
That's the buffer.
That, it coincides with that line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Right, the next witness is Julie Jordan. Julie's a landscape designer. We could have her sworn in.
Could we have our landscape designer sworn in, please?
Yes, good evening, ma'am. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth this evening?
I do.
Thank you.
And Nancy, what is your occupation? I mean, Julie, I'm sorry.
Wow, I really wasn't ready for that.
Now watch
I-
those trick questions.
My name's Julie Jordan, Jordin, and I'm a landscape designer and horticulturist with 25 years experience designing and building coastal landscapes in New England.
And what was your role in this project?
So far, restraint, making everybody do less. So anyway, I'm worked with the client to develop a design brief that respects the agrarian nature of Block Island and preserves the walls, severely limiting the work of disruption on the already existing pristine meadows. Building wildlife and environmental buffers for birds and critters, using the existing plant material that's already there, and then adding mature plant material to resist deer browse and keep the buffers pure so that the Hodge Preserve and the impact of the architecture on the Block Island landscape is minimal.
And do you have a landscape philosophy that you're employing with the decisions that you've made?
Yes, my focus in my designs has always been respect to historical nature of these sensitive areas and environmental preservation, minimizing hardscapes and programming. And I think that's why the client thought I was a good fit.
And the end goal here is to create a landscape design that looks like what?
That we weren't there.
Okay. So it's trying to create something that's been there for a long time and it looks natural in its location and it fits in well.
Correct.
So how about the driveway? Is there any decisions that were made to try to make the driveway as it approaches the house from a landscaping perspective look natural and aged, so to speak?
Yes, the driveway will be 2 single tracks, and it will go with the contours of the landscape that are already existing, so that there will be minimal grade changes and disruption of the natural land masses.
And what about those nasty invasive species? Do you have any thoughts on those?
Yeah, so we will be removing mechanically and by hand invasive species, replacing them with plants that are already thriving on the property.
Okay. And you're going to be putting mature plants in so that when they go in, they're going to be tall. So this isn't a situation where we're going to have to be waiting 15 or 20 years to get to a point where the impact and effect of them are noticeable.
The most important thing is to create a plant community of varying sizes of plants. So there will be large scale black cherries, but they'll be planted with smaller and other sized black cherries. So all of, or bayberry or viburnum, they'll go in as groups of mamas and babies and make masses of plants in addition to the plants that are already existing like you see in nature.
And I understand from the engineers that there's suitable land area to avoid needing rain gardens, but there was a decision to put rain gardens in anyway, and you've landscaped those. Could you explain that to the board?
Yeah, the rain gardens are plant communities that receive the water from the building and from the surface water, and they filter it through plant roots. So those will be in areas that are appropriate aesthetically, adjacent to wetland areas, and we will be using those for drainage.
And I hear there's an orchard it's proposed
Yeah.
as well? Tell the board
Yes,
about the orchard.
driveway, as you drive in, the client would like to have naturally maintained apple trees. And I think it's appropriate for the farmland look. And they will be maintained without the use of pesticides.
And that was a condition that the Conservation Commission suggested that we had no objections to, is the use of nothing toxic on their
Correct.
pesticides and herbicides, correct?
Yeah,
Is that-
so we'll be choosing varieties that are bred to be more adaptable to modern diseases. And probably intermingling those with some heirloom varieties to improve resilience.
So are these plants that you're talking about tough enough to sustain life without having to have massive amounts of water put on them?
Yes, I mean, there will be irrigation on the project, but everything that we've designed into the project is designed so that it needs less inputs. The turf grass that's specified is a fescue that needs half, if not a third less water than a regular bluegrass or Cape Cod or coastal mixed turf grass. So it's called the Black Beauty fescue. And it also doesn't need the fertilizer inputs that the regular turf grass needs.
All right, I've just got a few questions for you based upon your experience as a landscape designer and the work that you've done through the years. Is it your opinion that the design and layout of the house and other proposed structures are related harmoniously to the terrain, especially in light of the landscaping design work that you've proposed?
Yes.
And will the landscape be developed in such a manner as to be in keeping with the character of the surrounding neighborhoods and in accordance with good development practice by minimizing vegetation and soil removal, retaining existing vegetation where desirable, and keeping any grade changes in character with the general appearance of the neighboring areas?
Yes, it will.
And is it your opinion that the landscaping development will not have any negative impacts on the environment?
Yeah.
And is it your opinion that proposed uses and structures will not cause a degradation of the quality of the surface or groundwater?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no other questions. for
Thank
Julie.
you. Does anyone have any questions?
Just one, I have to ask. You mentioned planting wild cherries.
Mhm.
Are these the same type of cherry that we have a lot around Block Island
Mhm.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of us are spending our time trying to figure out how to cut down these cherries because they grow at an alarming rate on Block
Cut them
Island.
right to the bottom.
Hmm?
Just cut them right to the bottom.
No, I'm questioning whether you take into consideration any changes in view sheds.
Oh, yes, they
might
will not be in
regrettable,
the view
you know,
shed on the,
20 years from now,
correct.
because they grow horribly fast here.
Yes, that's the idea.
Okay.
So that they will shield the buildings from the Hodge Preserve and the neighboring properties. But they will be intermingled with viburnum and shad and things that are more resilient but less tall. A few of those to block the high view plane, though, I think would be appropriate.
They obstruct view when allowed to, grow.
They would only be planted, and let me say this correctly, they would only be planted in areas where hedge and there's already existing black cherries thriving, doing their job, screening this vegetation from the Hodge Preserve or this building.
So the screening is to
Mhm.
benefit the people outside the property.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's not all black cherry. I mean, there's
Right.
viburnum dentatum
Right.
and a lot of other natives, so it's not fully focused on black cherry, but they are a quick grower that will help minimize the views of this from the Hodge Preserve, and they're for sure going to do well. So I think those used with restraint will be very helpful.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, Mr. Hool?
Could we have Mr. Hool sworn in, please?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Hool. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth this evening?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. James Houle, Houle.
And Jim, what is the nature of your occupation?
I am a real estate appraiser and land use consultant.
Are you licensed?
I am
Okay. And how long have you been in your profession?
just a few months shy of 50 years,
So are you still in training?
almost, almost. I'll, when I get to the 50th year.
Okay, thank you very much. And you've been brought into this project to study certain aspects of the proposal in relationship to a special use permit. What was the nature of your role?
Well, specifically, it was to look at the project from my professional standards, from the idea of looking at it in terms of real estate and land use consulting, to see how the proposal actually does conform to the standards that are in requirement, that are required for the special use permit on section 401.
And you incorporated the things that you're going to share today in summary form and report, is that correct?
I did.
This is the report I'm showing.
It is.
I know we emailed it in, I brought copies.
That's exhibit 6. Exhibit 6 is a report prepared by Mr. Hul.
Okay, well, if you could explain the
Sure.
highlights of the report and your findings and what you did to create your opinions and the examination you've done.
So when I was retained to perform this service, I read through all of the documents. I looked through the plans. I read through all the other professionals' studies that had been done and the testimony that had been given in front of the planning board. I, of course, reviewed the New Shoreham zoning code. I looked at the comprehensive land use plan from 2016. I looked at several other related documents, historical study that was done by the state on the historical structures of Block Island. I came out, of course, and looked at the site, visited the site and visited the surrounding area, and finally formed my opinions and prepared the report. So essentially, you know, there are 9 standards of the special use permit that I looked at, but I'm not going to, they are all covered and discussed in the report. But I think primarily the 3 that I want to concentrate on are 1, 2, and 7. Number 1, which is the proposed use of structure is appropriate for the specific site and is compatible with adjacent buildings in form, placement, and design. The design and layout of the buildings and other proposed structures shall be related harmoniously to the terrain and existing buildings in the vicinity. Scale, height, bulk, proportions, proposed buildings are designed including roof style, facade openings, architectural style, and detailing building materials should be visually and dimensionally compatible with the surrounding area. So I began by looking, I think that one of the best documents that I've seen was prepared by the architects and passed out earlier to you during the architect's testimony, in which he discussed, showed the elevations that he had prepared from the walking trail of the site and how the buildings would stand out. And you can see that they really blend in dramatically to this rolling terrain that is the lot. I think it really does a great job. And of course, the buildings are broken up, as they discussed, into several buildings that make it look as though it was the natural growth of a New England farm, very typical for all New England farms in the rural areas. I noticed in one of the study from the architectural history, I put some photographs in that I took directly from them that show buildings that have rambling styles with the accessory buildings going out that are here on Block Island. It's very much in keeping with that same pattern. So thinking about that, I looked to see how many of the buildings in the immediate area of the subject property actually had multiple buildings on their sites. And I isolated on what is
page 13 of my report, I isolated a section of the GIS map of New Shoreham where there are several lots, I think there are 6, 7 lots that are developed in the immediate area of the subject property, and each of those have multiple buildings. I found it very interesting that in some cases they have 4 buildings, the 747 Corn Neck Road. I did take these from the Vision cards. I didn't enter the properties, so I trust the fact that Vision had correctly, during their revaluations, had correctly itemized all the buildings who were on site. But essentially, the multiple buildings, every single lot in the area around the subject property does have multiple buildings. And it's that same type of rambling accessory building that rather than add on to a main structure, that they would simply build another building as the use came up. Very typical, again, of all farmlands, farm uses throughout New England. So I think it really very much satisfies the item, the standard number 1. Standard number 2, which is a proposed site as developed will not adversely affect the established physical and visual pattern. Here, I really did lean on the 1991 Rhode Island Historical Preservation Commission that published a historic and architectural resources of Block Island. And in their conclusion, they say the isolated buildings and natural features can be singled out, identified, and treated as remarkable, but this approach missed the exceptional aspect of Block Island, that the entire environment is a vivid historic landscape of great appeal, and that the buildings of Block Island, houses, hotels, stores, lighthouses, as well as hills, fields, beaches, cliffs, stone walls, lanes, and roads should all be considered as a whole. And I think that really this, what it's saying is that not any one thing is necessarily perfect in its overall, but the scheme of how it should look when you're looking at long distance views on Block Island, I think is sort of that what we're trying to achieve. And I think that the architects have done a really good job of handling that particular item. It's funny because I testify a lot in front of zoning boards, and typically a town will have an area that is very specific, that people are concerned about the overdevelopment or larger buildings coming in or crowding out. And Block Island is unique in the fact that it's the entire island that creates that vista. And I found that to be really striking when I was actually trying to put this project in the scope of it. The items 3, 4, 5, 6 are in a lot of ways handled by the other experts that have testified. I did address them in the report, but the next item that I really wanted to hit on was the use is number 7. The use is consistent with the purpose of the zoning ordinance, the purpose of the zoning district, the goals and objective of the comprehensive plan, and any other adopted town plan. I did spend considerable time going through the 2016 land use plan, and I found that really that this project really, in my mind, fits the goals that are outlined in chapter 6 in H2, that it achieves the sustainable housing, diversity of housing, healthy housing conditions, ensuring new development is directed in areas that have the correct infrastructure. And so I really found that the fact that the architects had taken so much time to conform with due respect on the elevation, on the length of the facade. Other than that, it appears as though they were very, very careful and including that, very careful to conform to all very specific standards that I really applaud the town for having such specific standards in their code. Most towns don't, and I think it's very good. And so overall, I think the project conforms to the standards well.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Boone.
Okay, I don't have any other witnesses, but the architect has been doing further study on this wall plane issue. And I don't know how you want to deal with that issue at the conclusion of our presentation, whether you would like to hear him make some final comments on it based upon a little more research he's done. I think it would be appropriate and quick, Greg? Okay.
So, thank you. Just to the question of it's the 75-foot max building plane question. Again, just to reiterate our interpretation of that bylaw stating that the portion of the building, the definition of that stating that the portion of the building facade aligned, it's measuring the portion of the building facade aligned in the same general plane. There are diagrams. There's two sets of diagrams. You were referencing Appendix I. Figures 5A, 5B specifically note that it assumes a consistent ridge height. That's why there's a provision for a 45-degree angle. So that's sort of if your building is longer than this, you can do the 45-degree angle, but the notes on figure 5A and 5B say that provision assumes a consistent ridge height. We went the other direction. We not only changed the ridge height, we turned the directions of the ridge. And I just wanted to further explain why we felt that satisfied a separation of the general plane of the building. Again, just explaining a little bit more, maybe thoroughly, where we got that
Thank you.
interpretation from.
Thanks, George.
Yeah, thanks.
No further questions.
Thank
No
you.
other witnesses.
I'd like, are there anybody in the audience who would like to comment? If not, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing and take this under advisement.
Second.
All in favor? May I make a request? No, I was going to ask if we could do. It's on the record now. It's on the record? No, I'm just scheduling. So I don't understand if it's possible to do things, if we could do.
A quick discussion on first, sure.
Could we do a quick discussion on Curtis? Yeah, sure. I have a feeling we're gonna differ on Curtis, so I was just gonna suggest that one of us do a plus and one of us do a minus.
I'll be right back.
Well, I forgot to tell you how to, when it clicks off it. I probably put the wrong password in. Let's see, on my, on here. I don't need to be sitting here to.
For the next.
No, but I need to discuss it. I can be sitting down there. I was just gonna go so I can collect my stuff and move out of here without this. All right, so. What? I would like to do both of them. If we can do it quickly, If not, we've got another hearing. This is a favor to me. Because I'm repeated, so if I don't have to say, I would. It's going to be a protracted discussion. I don't know, maybe we can. We'll see how everybody feels. What? I live there. And I have to, yeah.
Yeah, well.
Okay, so you want to.
I'd like to call us back to order. We're going to have discussions and decide whether we can just decide quickly or whether we need to defer and think about this. Let's start with Curtis, and I will lead off by saying that, I believe that because that foundation existed, I don't have a problem with the lot coverage since they are keeping within or even a little less. So that's where I'm coming from. I feel like it's grandfathered in, it should be grandfathered in for them. And this is irrespective of anything else that went on. So that's my opinion. And I know, Judith, you're not on that page, so.
Well, let me try to summarize. I have no problem with the setback relief. They have hardship, demonstrated hardship there. They have a well, they have a septic system. That prohibits building anywhere else on the lot. So I have no problem with that aspect of the variance. But the aspect that has to do with lot coverage, I'm just not sure how I feel about it. I mean, you have to have a characteristic that's a unique characteristic of the land. And to me, there's nothing unique. I mean, a small lot is a small lot. Everybody who has a lot under 20,000 or 25,000 square feet, whatever it is, remember it's 20 or 25. That's the cutoff for you get an extra 1% lot coverage. And ordinarily, it would be 4% lot coverage for residential A zone. Because it's a small lot, the ordinance gives them an extra percentage to work with. So that's the aspect of the application that I was questioning, and all I'm really saying is, if you're making a case for variance, give me something to work with.
Well, what I'm saying we've got to work with is that there was a foundation there and there was a house there and it's been there for who knows how many years. So does anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I do. So the standard says a unique characteristic of the subject land or structure. So I think personally, I can fit foundation into that hardship. Because it can really call it concrete foundation, concrete slab, that's a structure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be a shame if this application got denied. So I agree with you.
I'm with the other three as well, based on the fact of it's a minor relief for a substandard lot.
All right, so
It's the existing foundation. At first, I was thinking about the house being centered more, but between the neighbors are all okay with it, and during the hearing with the well and the location and septic, makes sense to keep it where it is.
and Mr. Landry encouraged us to consider that this had been there before. So,
Yeah, I mean, in thinking about it, I think another, I can throw in a positive.
yeah,
The fact that this is an old subdivision of substandard lots surrounding it, there's sort of a historic nature of the subdivision
Component.
itself. that would not be the case if it's a lot, sitting out in the middle of other lots that are all conforming to the lots.
Okay, so we seem to be on the same page. Does somebody want to write the decision? If not, you want to do it?
I can take a crack. Be my first.
Okay, sure. We'll help you. We'll help you. Excellent. All right, so can we be that expeditious with Flower and Spade? Robbie, you may want to lead off with this one because you've got the,
Yeah, I will not go for it based on the definitions of building plane versus, wall plane. I think that wall plane is the definition that they're using for the longest building plane of 60 feet. Because a wall plane consists, I can pull this up, definition. But the definition of wall plane is the 60 10 that they're referencing for that 60 10.
Could I just raise one issue on that?
Yeah.
Appendix I, figure 4. It talks about limiting wall planes to 45 feet in length. And it shows some diagrams where it's 75 feet. But there's a 6-foot offset. And then if you go to figure 5, it gets to more what you're saying about 16-foot difference. But the first note in that figure 5 is assuming a consistent building. So it seems to me that they don't have a consistent building. But what they do have is different building heights and the 6-foot inset with a point. But that's just my reading of this.
well, it's definitely an interpretation. Putting that particular issue aside, how do you feel about this application?
No
So
problem.
am I. Yes, so am I.
But I'd have to spend some more time with Appendix I and a little learn.
Right.
At a different time of day to really understand I don't even understand the discussion.
And
yet.
what impact it has on whether that they would have to ask for a variance, right? If because it can't exceed 70. Cannot
Is
exceed. Yeah.
it a 400? Is it a variance from close?
514.
They could do that.
Yeah. They just couldn't.
Well, is this one we want to think about a little, or does somebody want to volunteer to write a decision and you write a counter one?
But why don't we think, can we get another opinion from someone else? Like, Jen, what do you think? You
Well,
know,
I could definitely do some research on it and into it.
you know,
Well, what about that? What about,
Yeah.
why do we do that and then we get some input and then we can reconvene to come to a consensus.
this is an important decision. We want to make sure we get it right. you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we could have a work session.
Mhm.
We could have a work session and I can talk about what I find in the work.
It'll give us a little more time to read Appendix I and, form an opinion.
Whatever.
All right. Okay.
May I have a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's close.
May I have a, not to make a quick comment?
I don't think we can do that.
So
Thank you very much.
It's your turn next.
So is this, are we gonna talk about later, talk about a date or
You need a chance to. Look at this. Let's take a look.
right, and I want.
Wanna
Here you're
email-
like, no, first on the agenda, in and out.
Good enough.
It's like back in corporate code days.
I was thinking, like, I wasn't resident.
Cormorant Cove and Black Rod. Yeah. We used to have our meetings started at, remember they started at 7 o'clock when we were in the library at the school? We'd have the, oh my God. Yeah, it'd be like 11:30 at night when we get done. That was insane.
Is that the only place open now?
I don't know how we did it.
It's good there.
I'm a, you have any?
Are you retired? You are?
Oh, wow. good.
Saber towels? Bathroom's right behind the outside of the hall.
Scary.
Aldo Leone and Anyama Zeke LLC, Plat 6, Lot 89, Weldon's Way, an application for an appeal by Aldo's Bakery of a notice of violation issued by the zoning official dated August 15th, 2022. Zoning official typically goes first. Oh, you go first.
No. So I made a bunch of copies for you. I think they got this for me,
Oh, this is, wait, this is all.
right?
I got like firing spade everywhere. I don't want to look at it. I'm recused.
Do you want them to swear me in or no?
I can swear you in, Jen.
Yeah.
You just swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Jen, these are all for your, these are all the, your,
That's all of the exhibits that I'm gonna go through right
and
now.
do I get to stamp them?
Yes, the stamp's right there.
You get a copy?
Okay, no, wait.
I know, I just was stamping just to see, make sure I was doing it right. This is exciting.
So on May 24th, 2022, I received a zoning complaint regarding carousel located at Aldo's Bakery. Zoning officials exhibit 1.
The complaint form.
Yeah, complaint form. And then I think it's just 1 page.
Okay.
The property is identified as lot 89 on assessors, plat 6, owned by Andiamo Zeke LLC, Aldo's Bakery and Ice Cream. Exhibit 2 is a letter from the tax assessor's office. Just stating who's.
Okay, just, I'm gonna stop you. The complaint form says lot 97.
That's incorrect.
Okay,
But
okay, all right.
Can I see the complete form? I'll file.
So this is 2, the tax assessors. Okay,
The subject property is located within the planned development zoning district, which is zoning ordinance section 319. So exhibit 3 is the planned development zoning district. The planned development was approved in 2001 by the planning board and established by the town council. So the next exhibit is map 600.
so wait, 319 consists of. 8 pages? 8 pages.
So the recorded map in the land evidence records says final major land development, Old Harbor Meadows, Walker Island Economic Development Foundation, plat 6, lot 88, 89, and 90. that was also part of the entire process establishing the land development zone for this particular lot.
That's up, zoning official exhibit 4.
The property is also located within the historic overlay, which is zoning section 317, which is exhibit 5. On June 6, 2021, Aldo's Bakery applied for a game license. They applied to the town council for a game license for the carousel, which is exhibit 5. As a result, the town solicitor submitted a letter to the town manager dated July 16th, 2021. That's exhibit 6.
Okay, wait a minute, sorry.
Am I going too fast?
Exhibit 5 is the historic overlay?
Yes,
Okay, and exhibit 6,
is,
the game license application from 2021, okay. 6,
yep. And then you have a letter from William Landry, town solicitor, submitted to the town manager dated July 16th, 2021. And it refers to the carousel being an amusement ride. Do you have that one?
yeah, I'm just reading it. Have you guys seen these? Do you want me to read it? The letter, Bill's
I
letter?
think that was in the file.
Does anybody want me to read it? Okay. I'm gonna read it for a second.
You wanna read it?
I'm
You wanna read it out?
I'm just gonna read it out loud because someone might not have forgotten. This will confirm my opinion that a mechanical, apparently coin-operated children's horse ride amusement at Aldo's is a prohibited use under the town of New Shoreham zoning ordinance. Section 111 of the zoning ordinance entitled General Prohibitions includes within its list of prohibited uses in all districts 9 period amusement parks or rides. I assume that this feature is relatively new at Aldo's. This use has been prohibited since at least June 17th, 1994. Obviously, it was in place prior to then. If it was in place prior to then and has remained in continuous use since then, it could possibly be a lawful non-conforming pre-existing use, and we should discuss further. That's 7.
Are we at the question stage yet, or we're just?
Well, occasionally I'm just reading what, like, a lot of this is just code, but,
I know, but
Yeah, I think I.
if you
submitted-
get through everything and then we can ask questions.
So then on July 21st, 2021, the town council granted the game license for the carousel. It was a split vote, I should note that. And that is, well, the first motion was to deny it, and then the second motion was, it was not a unanimous vote. The second motion was to approve it. So that is the next 7, 8, the license.
To approve
For the license for the game.
their game license that they applied for in June 6, 2021.
Correct.
That this is the response to that, granting it.
Yes. No, the first motion was to deny it, and that didn't pass. The second motion was to approve.
That this is an entire
It wasn't a
year,
unanimous vote.
this is an entire year prior to the,
Yes.
this
I
is,
have
that,
a copy, I can. So it was denied in 2021. Then okay, so now we're on to May 3rd, 2022. The property owner applied for a game license application with the town council. And that is the next exhibit.
okay, wait. Just trying to keep this all, so I'm still trying, so the complaint came in after that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, yep.
Wait, let me just,
So the applicant applied for the game license in 2022 on May 2nd, 2022. That's the next.
That's the
exhibit.
second application.
Yes, the second application.
Anybody have a clip? Yeah. I can use. Thanks. So exhibit 9 is the gate license application from 2022.
Correct. Then I received, after that license was submitted, it was actually the zoning complaint. But this, game application license was still pending before the town council. So then on,
So the application, or we can ask the applications. Okay,
so on June
Good chart.
15th, 2022, the town council voted to deny the game license and issued a letter, a follow-up letter, from the town clerk, Millie Guinness. So I do have a copy of the minutes from the town council meeting, June 15th, 2022.
which is exhibit 10.
And a copy of the letter from the town clerk to Aldo's Bakery. And the town council did not renew the license as the game is not noted on the application. If the amusement ride located outside of the bakery referenced is not a game, but an amusement, it is in violation of section 111, general prohibitions of the New Shoreham zoning ordinance.
Okay, so
Got those?
11.
Is there a copy of that motion of the council for that letter from Millie, June 20th?
Yes, I submitted it as an exhibit. I have an extra copy here.
That's the June 15th minutes?
Yep,
Could I take a look at that?
yeah, sure.
Here.
Here's a copy of June 15th, 2022, and the letter.
This is if anybody needs a picture.
So I'll get back to the complaint. So during my investigation, I took a photograph of the carousel that I would like to mark it as an exhibit. I'm not sure the number.
You're at 12.
Sorry. And there are extra copies in there.
Yeah, anybody want to see this?
Yeah. I then issued a notice of violation on August 15th, 2022, which is recorded in the land evidence records as book and page, or the book is 564, page 355, stating that I found that it was my opinion that we're in violation of the zoning ordinance section 111-9, which states amusement parks or rides are prohibited. It is located on the exterior patio at Aldo's Bakery. I also found that they were in violation of the historic district overlay as they didn't apply for any they did not apply for a certificate of appropriateness. The carousel is not located is not identified in the planned development zoning district or on the recorded map. And that's pretty much it. I would like to submit section 111 general prohibitions
That'd be exhibit 14.
would be the last exhibit. That's it.
Okay. Is it in?
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. So you. Sure, now we can ask questions.
Yeah, so does the town have a definition of amusement ride?
No. Do you want to?
Typically, you're gonna get your chance. We just ask questions of Jen, and then we may ask the same questions of you. You can respond to the question as well once it's your. But your opinion is not gonna, I'm gonna have, Mark has a question for Jen, so.
The town does not have a definition of amusement ride in the New Charlotte zoning ordinance. Does not.
So I questioned, so I looked up what an amusement ride would be. And the only thing I found Rhode Island Rhode Island statute was something about safety. It was a public statute on safety for amusement rides, and it defined amusement rides. And it explicitly excluded coin-operated rides. I asked Bill Landry about that, and he said, well, it doesn't matter because every town can decide their own ordinance, zoning ordinance. But from my opinion, putting amusement ride in is not, doesn't define it. So that's like, is horseback riding an amusement ride?
I'm pretty
Is,
sure the zoning ordinance actually defines horseback riding.
Okay.
There's something in there, right?
is parasailing?
Yeah.
It is an
No,
amusement ride?
there's, no, I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, so those, anyway, I just wanted to know if the town, when the town council dealt with this, did they define it? They didn't. Okay, thank you.
No, sorry.
Jen, I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
So how does it work? Does someone come in, fill out a violation, like a form, and then you go out and then you inspect it? Is that how it works?
So I do an investigation for a possible zoning violation if someone fills out.
Okay, then do you usually ask like the potential violator, like what their defense is and so forth, and they get a chance to respond or no?
Depends. Sometimes I would meet with the property owner. If I don't need to. Depends on the situation.
Okay. And how many do you get a year?
Last year, maybe a dozen.
Okay, great, thank you.
This is the only notice of violation.
Nancy.
Excuse me, this is the only one you got all year?
Yeah.
This is the only one you gave? Okay.
My turn?
Your turn, please.
Yes.
later.
Okay, so how did we get to the end of the meeting when we came right after the two applications?
Oh, look at whose children are these?
They are Alessio. Stephen is here on behalf. And the other two are my twin grandkids, Declan and Abigail Murray. So keep those faces in mind when you deal with this. In answer to your question, there is no definition of amusement ride within the zoning ordinances. However, the applications that we're talking about were renewals of gaming device applications that have been filed since gaming applications were required, and gaming devices have been around in Aldo's since the 80s. So the question starts with, is it a prohibited amusement ride or is it something else? And the word amusement is found in two places in our town ordinances. In the definition of gaming device in the zoning ordinance, which reads as follows: a machine, apparatus, computer component or item or items of electronic equipment connected to an electronic outlet by one cord, which upon the insertion of a coin, slug, token, etc., may be operated by the public generally for use as a mechanical, electronic, video, or other game or amusement. So, and then in the town ordinances, chapter 8, Article 2 is entitled amusements. And there we find the exact same definition of gaming devices that I just read to you from the zoning ordinance. And it's chapter 8, which prompts the renewals for these gaming devices year after year, not as a method to prohibit them, but as a way to charge, because it's a license fee every year.
So look at that definition of gaming device in light of the characterization by the town that this coin-operated kiddie carousel is not an allowable gaming device. It's an apparatus, it's electronic, it's connected by a single cord that you plug into the wall. It's operated by inserting money by the public, and it is generally for amusement. As an aside, there is a letter that I would like to put into the record from the Volunteer Fire Department thanking the owners for a donation of $1,500, which they have collected from the carousel over the summer and donated to the Volunteer Fire District.
Appellants Exhibit 1. Okay, so Nancy, do you have more?
Let me just see. I do want to add, there are several communities not in Rhode Island that have a prohibition against amusement rides that specifically have an exception for kiddie rides. The types of things, I don't know if they're still there anymore, but they used to be, you could, ride a horse outside the grocery or the plane or what have you. Those are the kiddie rides. This is consistent with what those kiddie rides are. And they're all been used in various forms at Aldo's since the 80s. So, I mean, the other question that Bill raised in his memo was whether or not this was a pre-existing use. And we have, again, there were a couple of pictures that we put in. I've got a few more of them, but I don't think it's even necessary to add those in. But we do have an affidavit from John DeRicchia, who was the owner of Dell's Amusements, attesting to the fact that he's provided Aldo's Bakery with coin-operated kiddie rides and various amusement games since the early 80s.
Appellant 2.
As far as a lot of it will still rest on, a pre-existing non-conforming lawful use. And I know that that's gotten a very gray area between what authority you have to determine that and what a court can determine, which confuses everything. But everything connected with this application to HDC, I mean, we're perfectly willing to go to HDC and try to get a certificate of appropriateness, but it certainly wasn't worth it when this blew up until it's finally approved or not approved. But it also, these rides predated the Historic District Commission. These rides predated the planned development. I wrote the original planned development for the bed development. And at that point, Aldo's had about 9 games of various kinds. They had a couple of space things that you wrote in, along with all the wall games too. So let's see. I'll give you my 2-minute rant at this point in time. One of the stated purposes of the zoning ordinances is to provide, and I quote, a range of uses and intensities of use appropriate to the character of the town. We've been suffering this great angst for the last couple of years with people talking about how we have to define who we are. We have to, recheck what our brand is. We are, and we have always been, a very family-friendly community. We have a lot of liquor establishments. I don't have a problem with that. We have a lot of outdoor entertainment licenses. I don't have a problem with that. But here I am trying to preserve a cute little carousel sitting within a fenced area of the bakery ice cream parlor on Weldon's Way, enjoyed by kids. I mean, I see the irony in this. I hope you people do too. And I'll answer any questions.
The question I had that was coming to mind was, we know that Aldo's has always had rides inside. I personally have watched my kids sit on motorcycles inside and machines. I've never seen anything outside of Aldo's.
But in 2012, that was the only time where the ordinance change required that they be inside the building.
But it did change, change, so it's.
But it was, if it was lawful pre-existing,
But if you've never had anything outside, I don't, and again, that comes down to the pre-existing, how it gets established.
but there were, in the 80s, there were a couple of things that
But then
were,
isn't an abandonment of use if you haven't used them, put them outside?
there was no intent to abandon.
I'm asking just because
Yeah.
I know that I personally, when I saw the carousel, I personally was like, whoa, like, where'd that come, like, what come from? Yes, kids are enjoying it. It's wonderful. Like all those things, it has nothing to do with it. My concern is that the HGC was not part of the HGC. We, slap people all the time on the wrist for not doing that, going to HGC. There's no difference for this ride. If the ordinance doesn't allow for us to have it, it doesn't allow for us to have it. Your definition of what it is seems to be contrary to Mr. Landry's.
But Bill doesn't have a definition that goes with.
He doesn't have a
amusement ride.
definition. The only definition that
I
I've
mean,
found,
I personally, well, does anybody have questions for Nancy?
no,
I don't,
no.
just to sort of feed off, I think our main purpose here is the appeal is an amusement ride or is it not? That's what
Yeah.
we're here to answer. Not if it should be approved by HTC, if it's okay inside or if it's okay outside. Is it a game or is it an amusement ride? I think that's our.
But how do we,
main thing
how
that
do
have to-
when we have a zoning ordinance that we continually look to definitions on for every little thing, and we don't have a definition of an amusement
Right.
ride. We do have a definition of a game,
A game which is used for amusement.
Right.
Which my kids, I put multiple dollars into that. And when multiple kids are riding it, they go up there and unplug the unit. The kids will stop using it because there's too many there. So it's plugged in and it takes money.
I have spent many, many dollars. with Machines for grandchildren.
I just wanted to submit another exhibit with zoning ordinance, section 113, non-conformance, addresses non-conforming uses, abandonment, change of use, repairs, alterations, relocation.
Yeah.
Was
That's
113 part
exhibit.
of the notice of violation?
No, I just submitted that because of what Nancy stated. And then also, the notice of violation is the plan development, the historic district, and the game or amusement. I mean, what you're,
So how many violations? There's 3 violations?
well, it's all one notice of violation. I was just pointing out the different sections of the zoning ordinance that are addressed.
But we're focused on if it's a game or amusement ride, pretty much.
So do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
The notice of violation says, you're hereby notified that you're in violation of the Town of New Shore zoning ordinance 319, plan development zone, as the new amusement ride is not a permitted use in the plan development zone. There's no approval of recorded plans showing an amusement ride or gaming device to be located on the exterior of the property.
But, okay. I think Mark has a great point about there's no definition by the town. I don't know why they wouldn't put a definition in the zoning ordinance. And then it's up to us to define it. I think that's kind of like,
And also they, in that decision on the 22nd, where they did not approve the game because they said it was not noted. Within that motion, it wasn't, it was just a motion not to accept. It didn't say why it was not accepted to, not to accept that. Because it was amusing.
Yeah. You have to, be sworn in. Just raise your, Bill, are you there?
Yes.
Could you swear?
Do you state your full name for the record, please?
Steve Papa.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
To answer your question before about the outside, those other games that she was talking about, the spaceship and the horse, and there was a car, all that was outside also underneath the porch, but the building was back further. Now that the building's been moved forward with the other project that was done in the back, just, all that other stuff was outside also.
Okay, thank you.
And after the council's action in June of 2022, Millie sent a letter to Aldo's Bakery in which she said, if the amusement ride located outside the bakery is the game referenced, it is not a game, but an amusement, and is in violation of section 1.
And that was my point, because in the council minutes, it didn't specify why they did not approve it,
Right.
but it said that.
Is that typical of council minutes to not specify denials?
There's supposed to be a reason. when you turn something
Finding
down.
a fact of why.
Yeah.
I haven't read I've never read council minutes.
How many town council meetings have you been to, Nancy?
Game license approved.
Since the night, if the game, I don't know how far back you had to get a license. We've had games since the 83, 84, but I can tell you since the thing over the years, I've been a part owner in the bakery 10 years, so that's at least 10 years. And Bobby and Al were also there before that, so every year you have to get a game license. And you have to, the police would have to come and inspect them. They have to sign the paper and they can hand in and get the money per license. Per game each place.
I guess I don't understand how they submitted a gaming application. It was denied because the town said it was an amusement ride. But there's no record or no reason why who in the town said that.
When it first came before the town council in the summer of 2021, that night at the hearing was accompanied by a memo from Bill Landry. And that was the memo that Kate read. I don't know whether that was prompted by Jen asking him, or it was directed to the town manager from Bill Landry.
Yeah.
We also didn't have a zoning official in July of 2021. So we're sort of in between. So that might be why Bill weighed in on it.
Yeah, that's why I was asked to weigh on it. If this may be helpful, and I'll keep it short because it's up to the board to make this this decision. But there are a lot of things that are not specifically defined in a zoning ordinance, and when something's not specifically defined, the law says to apply a common sense, ordinary, plain meaning of the words used, looking at each of the words and giving effect to each of the words. So in this case, we're dealing with an amusement ride. So it's definitely an amusement. I don't think anybody disagrees. And it's definitely a ride. Not all amusements are rides. There are amusements that are defined for licensing purposes that have nothing to do with zoning. They have to do with what kind of license you need. But you need both licensing and zoning to do anything in town. So the licensing ordinances are not really helpful. the state safety ordinances that are not the zoning enabling act, they deal with safety inspections, and the state can choose that they want to have safety rules for certain kinds of amusements and not others, and they exempt children's amusement rides, and that makes perfect sense for the state. But those words are not in the ordinance that I had to interpret and that the board has to interpret. It didn't say amusement rides except children's rides. It said amusement rides. And the council had the power then to make an exception, and they have the power now to make an exception. So that I leave that as just the legal guidance. It's up to the board to make the determination. It's my opinion that the board cannot make a decision on whether something is a legal non-conforming use or not. That's something that has to be done by the courts. I think Nancy made reference to that. There's a lot of authority on that. It's been very consistent, and I checked it today and it hasn't been overruled. So I agree with Rob that the issue before you is to decide whether this is an amusement ride or not, period.
And if I could just address that again, Bill, as you said, you know, you take the words in their context, and section 111 says amusement rides or parks. Now, a common sense reading of that could lead you to say, of course, amusement rides that you find in amusement parks would be Ferris wheels, roller coasters. That type of ride is incorporated in section 111. But we have a specific definition of a gaming device that contains all of the elements of what this is. And I just argue that that should be what controls. It's in the zoning ordinance. And it also is not going to be earth-shattering or destroy the fabric of society if there's a little carousel on Weldon's Way that's allowed to continue.
Well, as Phil just said, not everything has to be defined and has to have a definition in zoning ordinance and other things that haven't. So why isn't this just a coin-operated kiddie ride that isn't in our zoning ordinance?
Yeah, I mean,
It is what it is.
I keep coming back to, you know, you ride a motor, you know, they have those games that you ride the motorcycles on, and you, the virtual screen, or, you know, that they have it at all the game places. What's the difference? And he unplugs. I mean, I think Nancy has a point. Yeah, it's, you know, it is outside, and, you know, Stevie referenced that they have had outside games. I didn't remember that. I was a teenager. I wasn't paying attention to rides. Anybody have any other questions for Jen or? Okay, well. Anybody in the audience? Mom, Mark, anybody?
Mark Emanuel, 840 West Side Road.
You should be sworn in. Let's just swear you in just for.
Mark, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I was hoping to come here and say absolutely nothing. I was hoping that the zoning board, which I was in your seat 35 years ago, would fix the mistake that we made as town council almost 2 years ago, where by a vote of 3-2, the town council allowed this to continue, not in perpetuity, but just till Columbus Day weekend. The applicant agreed. We're dealing with it again for the next year. If this sounds familiar, it should. It's usually what happens on Block Island. They delay, deny, whatever means possible to elongate something like this. Mr. Landry's memorandum to us as town council members couldn't be any simpler. In legal terms, it said,
it had to go. Basically telling us if you don't prohibit this, and this is continued to be allowed, what's to prevent it from showing up at Finn's? What's to prevent it from showing up at Deadeye's? Before you know it, there'll be one in front of the Royal or any other place on this island if this is allowed to happen. I have more, but I'm only going to say that. Remember, the byproduct of a decision that supports this notice of violation can go an awful long way as to what is appropriate, the word that's been used before for Block Island. And let me get something else off my hands. This is almost 2 years before various boards and committees on Block Island. That's absurd. That is absolutely absurd that it's taken this long.
Can I address that comment? When the town council in 2021 let it go, and 3 people didn't agree with Mark at that point. These gaming license applications are yearly, they're renewed. So the following year, the applicant filed for a renewal of the application. It didn't come on an agenda until July. The notice of violation came in August. It was addressed. We were ready to proceed in October, and from October to January, there were quorum issues, so we never could get a hearing. We're here now. We would have been happy to have done it. It has not been dragging for 2 years by a long shot.
Thank you.
I have a question. How can the town council approve it 1 year, but then the next year they don't approve it? Is that what happened?
Different council.
But 1 year their definition is A, and then the next year their definition is B.
Right.
They didn't. They had a lengthy conversation 2021
Yeah.
because 3 people clearly didn't want to put kibosh on this. But they never really could get together to figure out how to deal with that. So they just said, well, you know, the year is over, Columbus Day, we'll just let it go. By the time it came up the next year, all they said was, oh, well, if this is the same thing, no. You know, we're not going to deal with it. They didn't deny it. They just said they weren't going to deal with it because they were assuming that, you know, it was, I guess, fell under the same thing as amusement rides. They never took up any of the issues that were possible to be dealt with. So the applicant has raised the issues now.
So in 2021, they did not decide it was a prohibited use because they let it continue.
Yeah, they just didn't want to say no.
Do you know if that was the same or different council?
Yeah, the minutes are.
Yeah,
You were probably on council for one of them.
June is Andre, Sven, Keith, Momo, and Martha. That's June of 22, and then
yeah, so
it's gonna be
same,
the same, right?
same council, yeah,
Andre, Sven, Martha, Keith, Momo. Yeah.
yeah.
So when it's permitted 1 year, like, then does it become a pre-existing non-conforming? I mean, I know we can't decide that, but
Just like the guy who bulldozed his house because
it's
the
just
guy said he could.
yeah,
you know.
like you can have it, but then you can't
No,
have it. And I know the frustration with the town council and not, you know, I get it, but Momo. Mark.
Let me answer Steve's question a little bit better. Initially, when it came to us in 21, it was a 3-2 decision to allow it to continue. Again,
the council was feeling somewhat like Solomon that night, is how I gather it. I remember it well, to allow them to continue it till Columbus Day weekend.
So you're on the two.
Yes. Right. In violation, I think, I certainly knew it was in violation. I think everybody else knew it was in violation, even though I can't speak for them. But they said, let's be somewhat Solomon-like and allow them to continue it till Columbus Day weekend. They promised. Well, that promise wasn't kept. They reapplied, and it was unanimously denied by the town council. That's the estimation, Steve.
You say town council, you mean issue game license?
Negative by a vote of 3-2, they were allowed to continue what I believe strongly was a violation till Columbus Day weekend.
I'm sorry, the town council was hearing.
In essence, in order to continue to allow it, they had to be officially granting the license. So our position is there was a gaming license in 2021. And come Columbus Day, they were talking about, well, nobody's going to be around after that. It could be renewed the following year. So they made application the next year.
It just says in the minutes, Mr. Boudreau moved to grant the New Shoreham game license for the horse carousel through Columbus Day, October 11, 21. Does not say anything about renewal.
No, because they're yearly.
It's automatic. Yeah.
Because it's
So they
automatic.
accepted the game license as it was a game.
Yeah, exactly.
To, you know, say it's a violation.
I know.
They can.
Well, they have the power to define what amusement ride is.
Oh, yes, they have.
And that's, so in all of this, the reason it's still going on is because the town council hasn't defined what an amusement ride is. And if they don't take up that challenge, then this is going to go on forever.
Right, it just keeps going.
Because in my common sense reading, it is not an amusement ride. People don't, the state of Rhode Island doesn't care about it for a safety concern as for being an amusement ride. So why would I think it's an amusement ride?
It's a kiddie.
Great point.
It's a kiddie ride.
And it's not our job to define it.
But you can define it as a gaming device under the zoning ordinances.
Well, if it fits the standards of a gaming device.
And it does. Read that definition again.
Town council, we grant it.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is just like, it's like, we've never had a meeting this, haven't had a meeting this late in so long, it's like. Mark.
I don't want to go back and forth
Oh.
anymore. I don't want to go back and forth anymore. You have a legal counsel in the form of Mr. Landry. He's already sent a memo out with his opinion of it and his legal interpretation. Listen to your legal representation.
We are, but he just told us to come up with a definition. He told us.
And where was the legal
Okay, wait a
representation
minute.
in 2021?
One at a time, please. Okay, I'm gonna make a motion to close this public hearing unless there's somebody else in the audience that would like to speak. And take advisement. Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Momo. Thank you, Stevie. Thank you, Nancy. Oh, thanks, Jen. No, it's 9:30 at night. We can barely talk.
But again, we were right after the application.
It doesn't matter, Nancy. We don't render decisions on the same night anymore.
You just gave the general opinion.
For discussion.
Oh, we can have discussion. We're not gonna, yeah, oh, yeah, we don't, but that's,
No, I
but as you know, from being our, town manager, there were many times when we thought that we had a consensus and then we voted and we didn't.
But I think so.
So just because of a discussion.
While it's fresh in everyone's mind.
I actually, I can discuss it right now, but I'd like to have another discussion again because it is 9:30 at night and my bedtime is 7:30 typically, and I.
Time out. This is my
Yeah.
first one on the appeal. How do we do it?
Bill just, he's off of it now.
Yeah, so
I asked
we
Bill-
uphold the appeal or we uphold the zoning violation or we overturn the zoning violation, right? Yeah. Grant the appeal, we grant the appeal or uphold the zoning violation. Or, yeah, in part and 6 of 1, yeah. Yeah. I'm just sorry, it's not, this is a long meeting. So I would, that's all Flower and Spade.
Twenty-three, a new state law has changes the way that it's binding and sees the towns regardless of what their zoning ordinance provide. At least 4 applicant members will be required quorum. This can include alternates, but no more than 5 to sustain the appeal. An applicant needs their votes of the majority of the members present and voting. Now it's from Bill. Yeah, I saw that. Go ahead. Number 4. Oh, no, three, yes, 3, yes.
So, in my opinion, it is a little kid's ride. It's not it wouldn't, it doesn't come to me as an amusement park. It's not an amusement ride. It's no different to me than the riding the motorcycle and looking at it. Like, I have an issue with it being outside, but now that they testified that they've had outside amusement stuff, I would like to see HTC, you know.
I look at it as it fits the definition of gaming. And by gaming as defined in our zoning ordinance.
I do worry though, as Momo spoke to, I do worry about them popping up all, I mean, it needs to be defined, I think that's something that the town needs to address because he's right. I mean, if you have every establishment, it's gonna look like, Coney Island. These little things, I mean, it's adorable and the kids are having a great time, clearly, we have.
But there's an ordinance as of 2012, that it, it has to be inside. So this is, anyone who tries to do it now, would have to face that ordinance deal. And, I mean, the idea of opening up floodgates is something that.
So maybe with our decision, we also provide a recommendation to the council to discuss the definition of amusement.
Yeah, I would like I think I would like to just be able to have a conversation with, I think we need to have a conversation with Bill. And I'm not prepared to have a conversation with Bill right now. I'm like, honestly, he's not there. He doesn't want to talk to us anyway. Yeah. Well, he's, he's seeing us out. He's seeing us through. I think it's.
Well, we also want to have a special meeting to discuss Flower and Spade, so I'll put this on the.
That'd be
agenda.
great. I would like to have that on the agenda so we can clearly.
A new a land use solicitor has been hired. As soon as I know more details, I'll send it around.
Okay. So we'll take a matter under advisement. Did we vote to adjourn? Okay, good. This is, I don't even remember, but we have not closed the meeting. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have minutes.
Oh, we have minutes. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of, what minutes were they? I read them. Just December 22nd, February 22nd. I'll make a motion to approve February 22nd meeting. All right. All in favor? Okay. If anybody going forward is gonna like May, I am definitely gonna miss the May meeting. So, if there's anybody that's gonna not be able to be here for May, we need to know as we're in the April meeting for scheduling.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you. Yeah.
Byron Spade.
It gave me. Hearing is closed, but thank you.
I probably need. That you have continued for.
How it hasn't been consistent, they can send it outside. I said, see, that's.
Game wise. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. I already made the motion
Oh,
to
second.
adjourn.